Chapter 9, 51 Master and Apprentice Part 1. That's our cue, BYD. Xenogrosh said while a Tier 2 Chaos Magic spell opened a hole the size of a baseball in the vampire's chest. It destroyed her heart and killed Lethe on the spot. I'll protect the humans, you kill the undead. Xenogrosh jumped back, bringing Rin along with her on the stands. Who does what now? Baitra was shocked seeing a wave of undead bodies belonging to all races flood the amphitheater while they emitted such an intense bloodlust that not even the Eldritch Abomination was immune to it. Kill them all. Uria the White Lady had no plans to follow the rules of Xenogrosh's game and led her army against the humans. A burly undead reached the human's side with a single jump as he shape-shifted into a Grendel. The creature in front of Xenogrosh was over 3 meters, 10 foot, tall and had a round head, with feral eyes as big as a saucer. It had bright red irises and vertical pupils that were filled with a mix of hate and spite. Its body was entirely covered by a dirty brown thick fur, akin to that of a giant sewer rat. The Grendel's maw was lipless and so large that it was the entire lower half of his head. The mouth was filled with sharp, long fangs, each one about 10 centimeters, 4 inch, long. A Grendel? What an amiable and rare pet you keep in here. It's like a small bird. Xenogrosh shape-shifted as well, turning into her shadow dragon form. It fits in just one hand. The Grendel froze in fear when he realized he had landed not on the floor, but on a giant scaly hand. Xenogrosh's 4 red eyes were staring at him in amusement, and each one of them was as big as the Grendel. The dragon's head scraped the ceiling of the cave while her claws dug deep into the ground that was forming craters under her feet due to her weight. Her wingspan covered the entirety of the amphitheater and prevented the undead from reaching the humans. Xenogrosh killed the Grendel simply by clenching her hand and breathed a wave of purple origin flames that turned the first wave of assailants into puffs of smoke. The undead stopped in their tracks, unable to believe their own senses nor to move a single muscle, and the hall fell silent for a second. After that, the stands full of humans burst into savage screams of joy as if it was just a football game and they were the fans of the winning team. None of them had really believed in dragons until that day, but seeing one appear in front of their eyes made all those teachings they barely remembered become deeply etched in their minds and hearts. We surrender. State your demands. Uria the White Lady said. Unlike Lith, Xenogrosh only had 2 sets of eyes. The first set was where it was supposed to be, and the second was horizontally lined up with the first on the dragon's snout, giving her a perfect peripheral vision. I have no demands. Palarin belongs to the Master now. Your only choice is to either surrender and die or defeat one of us and survive. Her voice was a deep, guttural roar that shook the nerves of everyone who heard it. Are you saying that if we attack the other woman, you will not interfere? Uria asked, receiving a nod in reply. If we kill her, do I have your word that you will grant safe passage outside of the city to all survivors? Another nod ensued. I thought we were friends, Zor. Why are you doing this to me? Baitra was on the verge of tears, something that the undead appreciated as much as they did her staring at the shadow dragon instead of keeping an eye on them. They charged at Baitra with the violence of a raging river and the grace acquired after hundreds of years spent on the battlefield. Each one of the undead despised the other member of the court well enough to know the abilities of their competition as well as their own. It allowed them to have seamless teamwork despite having rarely fought together. We are friends, BYT, but not the kind that travels Mogre to make wreaths of flowers and good memories. Zorth replied, I need you to wake up. If you stay as you are, you're going to die, either by the hand of our enemies or by that of our so-called allies. Baitra emitted a Tier 4 chaos spell, Howling Void, from each of her hands. They parted the sea of enemies in front of her, killing dozens of them, yet hundreds remained. All she had managed to achieve was to buy herself a second, maybe 2. I don't want to kill them, I barely know them, they are. She managed to say before being drowned again in fangs, claws, and spells. The undead's innate mastery of darkness magic allowed them to use its true magic form and to infuse it into their blows. The spells that were hitting her non-stop ate at Baitra's body inside and out while her flesh was torn apart by the living storm of limbs surrounding her. They are what? Innocents. Each one of them has probably as much blood on their hands as you. They are disgusting pigs, fattened on the flesh of their own neighbors. They know nothing of our hunger or our loneliness. Why do you keep holding back?" Xenogrosh was seething with anger. Her best friend was being slaughtered in front of her eyes, yet she stood still. Red tears streamed down her scaly cheeks while her feet stomped the ground in the only way she had to express her outrage. The red drums of the blood madness threatened to burst Bytra's head open, and the splitting headache it gave her eclipsed even the pain from her wounds. Yet hearing Zoratha's voice, her desperate screams of incitement was more than she could take. Bytra stopped resisting the madness and let her heart follow the beat of the red drums. She shapeshifted into her Reiju form and fought back. A Reiju was the evolution of a seer, horse-type magical beast, whose powers were based on the light and air element. Their appearance was that of a Chinese dragon fused with a warhorse. The resulting creature had silver-white scales covering their horse body, with large branching horns over their head, long whiskers, a thick silver mane, and a long, scaled draconic tail. Bytra, however, was an emperor beast abomination hybrid, making her body black, her mane blood red, and her eyes yellow. The transformation was accompanied by a burst of lightning and chaos energy that blasted away the undead that were the closest to her and allowed her to escape the encirclement. Bytra's hooves emitted sparks of electricity every time they struck the ground, giving it an opposite charge to her own that made her gallop speed akin to a maglev train. She infused her horns with so much chaos magic that they turned black. Darkness magic was the bane of the undead, and chaos magic was still darkness, just several times stronger. All the undead in front of her charge disappeared in a puff of smoke, as if they had just been mist figures instead of powerful beings. The red drums of the blood madness beat faster with every life she took, and soon the war song turned from sound into images. Chapter 952 Master and Apprentice Part 2. Bytra performed a sharp turn to her left, creating an ash cloud out of her fallen enemies and reliving her memories as an emperor beast. After evolving and learning the forge mastering arts of the Reiju bloodline, Bytra had gone to put them to the test against the first and the greatest ruler of flames, Rifa Minadion. She had lost in both experience and skill, but not in talent nor love for forge mastering. The two master artisans admired each other's creations, so Minadion offered Bytra to become her apprentice. The Reiju accepted, and soon, thanks to Minadion's teachings and her own talent, Bytra became the fourth ruler of the flames. I was a highly coveted title that identified her as the best forge master of her generation, but the number one spot overall still belonged to Minadion. Bytra had lived in her tower and watched her work with Minadion's fury long enough to understand the reason why she was incapable of surpassing the first ruler of the flames. No matter how much Bytra tapped into her potential, without the tower she would never be able to craft something like the fury. To come out of Minadion's shadow, she needed to even the field. With each failed attempt to close the gap between them, admiration and respect turned into sour envy that poisoned Bytra's life as well as her creations. The memory ended, making Bytra neigh in fury as if the events she had witnessed didn't happen centuries ago, but yesterday. Urea the White Lady exploited her confusion to hurl a mass of water the size of a river. It covered the ground, dispersing the electricity it stored and making the Reiju crash onto the ground. The living bolt had finally stopped, and the undead didn't miss their chance to regain the upper hand. Wights and wraiths drained Bytra's life force simply by touching her, while the rest of the undead used their claws to aim at her vitals. They were now cursing their own dimensional ceiling array that left them with nothing but what they wore. To shut it down, they would need to reach the control panel that was just 2 corridors and 3 rooms past the Shadow Dragon. Don't stop. Memories are everything for a mage, Xenogrosh said. They bring you pain, but also power and experience. Remember who you are, BYT. Remember and come back to me. Bytra whined in pain, torn between the visions of the past from the blood madness and the present threat. Prompted by Zoratha's words, the Reiju embraced the suffering coming from both sources and shape-shifted again. Another burst of lightning, chaos, and blood allowed her to stand up. Her humanoid form resembled that of a woman covered in small black scales, with horns on her head and long blood-red hair dancing in the air as if she was amid a storm. A burst of emerald flames enveloped her body, covering it with one of her prototypes for the Master's Dominator armor, and making Manadian's fury appear in her left hand. The mystical hammer amplified her natural abilities, turning Baitra into a living Tesla coil that unleashed lightning bolts as powerful as natural ones against her enemies. Some undead burst into flames, others died on the spot, while the rest bled from all their orifices. The flow of blood and mana triggered the red drums in her head, showing her another glimpse from the past. Even though Baitra's breakthroughs with runesmithing had allowed the forge masters around Mogar to bring their crafts to the next level, it still was not enough to quench her ambition. She was sick and tired of being the second best, to the point of belittling her own achievements. In her mind, she had just improved something Mina Dion had created instead of inventing a new forge mastering technique. To add insult to injury, Mina Dion claimed to be her #1 fan and always spoke highly of Baitra. To the Reiju, it meant that her former master didn't feel threatened by her talent, that Mina Dion didn't even consider her as a rival. After one failure too many at crafting her own mage tower, Baitra had enough of playing nice. The foolish Mina Dion had never revoked her privileges, so the Reiju had no problems getting inside the tower, nor slaughtering all of Manadian's precious apprentices, even her so-called successor that she had spent so much time and effort preparing. By the time the alarms triggered, the tower was painted red. Mina Dion was shocked by the betrayal of someone she had always considered as a friend and forced to decide whether to fight Baitra or try to save those who still had a spark of life. She foolishly tried to do both, giving the Reiju the chance to steal Manadian's fury and run away after piercing her heart with the horn Raijas had on their forehead. Baitra knew that the tower would heal the wound, but it still bought her time. Meanwhile, the lightning discharge had ended and Baitra threw the fury against her enemies, creating an ash cloud. The undead believed her disarmed, but despite the hammer was still flying in the air, there was another in her left hand. Manadian's fury had the ability to create a temporary copy of itself, allowing more than one forge master at a time to use its powers and perform four-handed crafting jobs. It was how Baitra had got her first taste at the hammer and how Mina Dion taught her apprentices. The Reiju used the copy to fend off the following waves while the original hammer returned to her hand, mowing down everyone on its path. Baitra was covered in blood, most of which was her own, her flesh was torn, and her mana cores were almost spent. The hunger almost drove her insane and forced her to relive her final moments as an emperor beast. After escaping from the tower, the Reiju had run for days while using accumulation non-stop to achieve a bright purple core and fight Mina Dion on equal footing. There was no way to forge master new relics, since as long as the first ruler of the flame was alive, the hammer would bear her imprint and be nothing but a fancy paperweight. Despite the Reiju's best attempts to stall for time, Mina Dion found her, and the two rulers of the flames fought relentlessly for days, both befalling in worse condition than Baitra currently was. Mina Dion was still grieving her fallen apprentices, and her life force was injured by her attempts to save at least one of them. Her lack of focus and vigor allowed Baitra to emerge victorious. The rush the Reiju felt when she imprinted the fury, making it finally her own, was only equal to the fear she experienced when her mana core started to crack just a few days later. The constant strain from the training first and fighting later had pushed the Reiju past her limits. That had been the day when Baitra had died along with all of her dreams, and Korg the Abomination had been born. Baitra couldn't believe how stupid her original self had been. She had thrown everything and everyone she loved away for power, just to lose it soon after achieving her dream. It wasn't just the victory that had turned out to be hollow, but her heart as well. Baitra wanted to throw away the fury for good, to fall to her knees and cry her eyes out until she found a way to make amends for her crimes. Yet she stood tall while appreciating Manadian's fury's weight, both physical and spiritual. Chapter 952.2 The Apprentice Surpasses the Master Part 1. That's our cue, BYD. Xenogrosh said while a Tier 2 Chaos Magic spell opened a hole the size of a baseball in the vampire's chest. It destroyed her heart and killed Lethe on the spot. I'll protect the humans, you kill the undead. Xenogrosh jumped back, bringing Rin along with her on the stance. Who does what now? Baitra was shocked seeing a wave of undead bodies belonging to all races flood the amphitheater while they emitted such an intense bloodlust that not even the eldritch abomination was immune to it. Kill them all. Urea the White Lady had no plans to follow the rules of Xenogrosh's game and led her army against the humans. A burly undead reached the human's side with a single jump as he shape-shifted into a grendel. The creature in front of Xenogrosh was over 3 meters, 10 foot, tall and had a round head, with feral eyes as big as a saucer. It had bright red irises and vertical pupils that were filled with a mix of hate and spite. Its body was entirely covered by a dirty brown thick fur, akin to that of a giant sewer rat. The grendel's maw was lipless and so large that it was the entire lower half of his head. The mouth was filled with sharp, long fangs, each one about 10 centimeters, 4 inch, long. A grendel? What an amiable and rare pet you keep in here. It's like a small bird. Xenogrosh shape-shifted as well, turning into her shadow dragon form. It fits in just one hand. The grendel froze in fear when he realized he had landed not on the floor, but on a giant scaly hand. Xenogrosh's 4 red eyes were staring at him in amusement, and each one of them was as big as the grendel. The dragon's head scraped the ceiling of the cave while her claws dug deep into the ground that was forming craters under her feet due to her weight. Her wingspan covered the entirety of the amphitheater and prevented the undead from reaching the humans. Xenogrosh killed the grendel simply by clenching her hand and breathed a wave of purple origin flames that turned the first wave of assailants into puffs of smoke. The undead stopped in their tracks, unable to believe their own senses nor to move a single muscle, and the hall fell silent for a second. After that, the stands full of humans burst into savage screams of joy as if it was just a football game and they were the fans of the winning team. None of them had really believed in dragons until that day, but seeing one appear in front of their eyes made all those teachings they barely remembered become deeply etched in their minds and hearts. We surrender. State your demands, Urea the White Lady said. Unlike Lith, Xenogrosh only had 2 sets of eyes. The first set was where it was supposed to be, and the second was horizontally lined up with the first on the dragon's snout, giving her a perfect peripheral vision. I have no demands. Palarin belongs to the Master now. Your only choice is to either surrender and die or defeat one of us and survive. Her voice was a deep, guttural roar that shook the nerves of everyone who heard it. Are you saying that if we attack the other woman, you will not interfere? Urea asked, receiving a nod in reply. If we kill her, do I have your word that you will grant safe passage outside of the city to all survivors? Another nod ensued. I thought we were friends, Zor. Why are you doing this to me? Baitra was on the verge of tears, something that the undead appreciated as much as they did her staring at the shadow dragon instead of keeping an eye on them. They charged at Baitra with the violence of a raging river and the grace acquired after hundreds of years spent on the battlefield. Each one of the undead despised the other member of the court well enough to know the abilities of their competition as well as their own. It allowed them to have seamless teamwork despite having rarely fought together. We are friends, BYT, but not the kind that travels Mogre to make wreaths of flowers and good memories. Zorth replied, I need you to wake up. If you stay as you are, you're going to die, either by the hand of our enemies or by that of our so-called allies. Baitra emitted a Tier 4 chaos spell, Howling Void, from each of her hands. They parted the sea of enemies in front of her, killing dozens of them, yet hundreds remained. All she had managed to achieve was to buy herself a second, maybe 2. I don't want to kill them. I barely know them. They are. She managed to say before being drowned again in fangs, claws, and spells. The undead's innate mastery of darkness magic allowed them to use its true magic form and to infuse it into their blows. The spells that were hitting her non-stop ate at Baitra's body inside and out while her flesh was torn apart by the living storm of limbs surrounding her. They are what? Innocents. Each one of them has probably as much blood on their hands as you. They are disgusting pigs, fattened on the flesh of their own neighbors. They know nothing of our hunger or our loneliness. Why do you keep holding back? Xenogrosh was seething with anger. Her best friend was being slaughtered in front of her eyes, yet she stood still. Red tears streamed down her scaly cheeks while her feet stomped the ground in the only way she had to express her outrage. The red drums of the blood madness threatened to burst Baitra's head open, and the splitting headache it gave her eclipsed even the pain from her wounds. Yet hearing Zoratha's voice, her desperate screams of incitement was more than she could take. Baitra stopped resisting the madness and let her heart follow the beat of the red drums. She shapeshifted into her Reiju form and fought back. A Reiju was the evolution of a seer, horse-type magical beast, whose powers were based on the light and air element. Their appearance was that of a Chinese dragon fused with a warhorse. The resulting creature had silver-white scales covering their horse body, with large branching horns over their head, long whiskers, a thick silver mane, and a long, scaled draconic tail. Baitra, however, was an emperor beast abomination hybrid, making her body black, her mane blood red, and her eyes yellow. The transformation was accompanied by a burst of lightning and chaos energy that blasted away the undead that were the closest to her and allowed her to escape the encirclement. Baitra's hooves emitted sparks of electricity every time they struck the ground, giving it an opposite charge to her own that made her gallop speed akin to a maglev train. She infused her horns with so much chaos magic that they turned black. Darkness magic was the bane of the undead, and chaos magic was still darkness, just several times stronger. All the undead in front of her charge disappeared in a puff of smoke, as if they had just been mist figures instead of powerful beings. The red drums of the blood madness beat faster with every life she took, and soon the war song turned from sound into images. Chapter 952.3 The Apprentice Surpasses the Master Part 2. Baitra performed a sharp turn to her left, creating an ash cloud out of her fallen enemies and reliving her memories as an emperor beast. After evolving and learning the forge mastering arts of the Reiju bloodline, Baitra had gone to put them to the test against the first and the greatest ruler of flames, Rifa Minadion. She had lost in both experience and skill, but not in talent nor love for forge mastering. The two master artisans admired each other's creations, so Minadion offered Baitra to become her apprentice. The Reiju accepted, and soon, thanks to Minadion's teachings and her own talent, Baitra became the fourth ruler of the flames. It was a highly coveted title that identified her as the best forge master of her generation, but the number one spot overall still belonged to Minadion. Baitra had lived in her tower and watched her work with Minadion's fury long enough to understand the reason why she was incapable of surpassing the first ruler of the flames. No matter how much Baitra tapped into her potential, without the tower she would never be able to craft something like the fury. To come out of Minadion's shadow, she needed to even the field. With each failed attempt to close the gap between them, admiration and respect turned into sour envy that poisoned Baitra's life as well as her creations. The memory ended, making Baitra neigh in fury as if the events she had witnessed didn't happen centuries ago, but yesterday. Uria the White Lady exploited her confusion to hurl a mass of water the size of a river. It covered the ground, dispersing the electricity it stored and making the Reiju crash onto the ground. The living bolt had finally stopped, and the undead didn't miss their chance to regain the upper hand. Wights and wraiths drained Baitra's life force simply by touching her, while the rest of the undead used their claws to aim at her vitals. They were now cursing their own dimensional ceiling array that left them with nothing but what they wore. To shut it down, they would need to reach the control panel that was just 2 corridors and 3 rooms past the Shadow Dragon. Don't stop. Memories are everything for a mage, Xenogrosh said. They bring you pain, but also power and experience. Remember who you are, BYT. Remember, and come back to me. Baitra whined in pain, torn between the visions of the past from the blood madness and the present threat. Prompted by Zoratha's words, the Reiju embraced the suffering coming from both sources and shape-shifted again. Another burst of lightning, chaos, and blood allowed her to stand up. Her humanoid form resembled that of a woman covered in small black scales, with horns on her head and long blood-red hair dancing in the air as if she was amid a storm. A burst of emerald flames enveloped her body, covering it with one of her prototypes for the Master's Dominator armor, and making Minadion's fury appear in her left hand. The mystical hammer amplified her natural abilities, turning Baitra into a living Tesla coil that unleashed lightning bolts as powerful as natural ones against her enemies. Some undead burst into flames. Others died on the spot, while the rest bled from all their orifices. The flow of blood and mana triggered the red drums in her head, showing her another glimpse from the past. Even though Baitra's breakthroughs with runesmithing had allowed the forge masters around Mogar to bring their crafts to the next level, it still was not enough to quench her ambition. She was sick and tired of being the second best, to the point of belittling her own achievements. In her mind, she had just improved something Mina Dion had created instead of inventing a new forge mastering technique. To add insult to injury, Mina Dion claimed to be her #1 fan and always spoke highly of Baitra. To the Reiju, it meant that her former master didn't feel threatened by her talent, that Mina Dion didn't even consider her as a rival. After one failure too many at crafting her own mage tower, Baitra had enough of playing nice. The foolish Mina Dion had never revoked her privileges, so the Reiju had no problems getting inside the tower, nor slaughtering all of Minadian's precious apprentices, even her so-called successor that she had spent so much time and effort preparing. By the time the alarms triggered, the tower was painted red. Mina Dion was shocked by the betrayal of someone she had always considered as a friend and forced to decide whether to fight Baitra or try to save those who still had a spark of life. She foolishly tried to do both, giving the Reiju the chance to steal Minadian's fury and run away after piercing her heart with the horn Raijas had on their forehead. Baitra knew that the tower would heal the wound, but it still bought her time. Meanwhile, the lightning discharge had ended and Baitra threw the fury against her enemies, creating an ash cloud. The undead believed her disarmed, but despite the hammer was still flying in the air, there was another in her left hand. Minadian's fury had the ability to create a temporary copy of itself, allowing more than one forge master at a time to use its powers and perform four-handed crafting jobs. It was how Baitra had got her first taste at the hammer and how Mina Dion taught her apprentices. The Reiju used the copy to fend off the following waves while the original hammer returned to her hand, mowing down everyone on its path. Baitra was covered in blood, most of which was her own, her flesh was torn, and her mana cores were almost spent. The hunger almost drove her insane and forced her to relive her final moments as an emperor beast. After escaping from the tower, the Reiju had run for days while using accumulation non-stop to achieve a bright purple core and fight Mina Dion on equal footing. There was no way to forge master new relics, since as long as the first ruler of the flame was alive, the hammer would bear her imprint and be nothing but a fancy paperweight. Despite the Reiju's best attempts to stall for time, Mina Dion found her, and the two rulers of the flames fought relentlessly for days, both befalling in worse condition than Baitra currently was. Mina Dion was still grieving her fallen apprentices, and her life force was injured by her attempts to save at least one of them. Her lack of focus and vigor allowed Baitra to emerge victorious. The rush the Reiju felt when she imprinted the fury, making it finally her own, was only equal to the fear she experienced when her mana core started to crack just a few days later. The constant strain from the training first and fighting later had pushed the Reiju past her limits. That had been the day when Baitra had died along with all of her dreams, and Korg the Abomination had been born. Baitra couldn't believe how stupid her original self had been. She had thrown everything and everyone she loved away for power, just to lose it soon after achieving her dream. It wasn't just the victory that had turned out to be hollow, but her heart as well. Baitra wanted to throw away the fury for good, to fall to her knees and cry her eyes out until she found a way to make amends for her crimes. Yet she stood tall while appreciating Minadian's fury's weight, both physical and spiritual. Chapter 953 Raiders of the Lost Academy Part 1. There's no time for weakness. Mina Dion is dead, and so is everyone else I knew. All the apologies in the world will not turn back time. The original Baitra was a genius as much as she was a monster, but now it's up to me to carry her burden. I have people who depend on me and a second chance at life. This time, I will not let everyone down. Baitra thought. I knew you would make it. Zorith roared. She was so happy that she would dance with joy if not for the too many witnesses. How do you feel, and what about the madness? I feel horrible, inside and outside. As for the madness, it's still there, but its hold over me has lessened. I don't know if I will ever be completely free from it, but right now, I'm aware of two things. First, I'm no more a threat to my allies, and second, I'm starving. Bitra said. We're done here. Let's get you something to what the heck. When Zorith folded her wings and turned around, she discovered why the members of the Red Gorgon cartel had stopped yelling for a while. They were no longer sitting on the stands, but kneeling with their heads and hands on the ground. What are you doing? Bitra asked while her hair still whipped around as if it was alive. We've witnessed the power and the mercy of the gods today. Warren spoke in a soft, deferent whisper. He felt unworthy of speaking to the two deities, yet not answering them would have been even more disrespectful. Bitra twirled her forefinger at her temple, suggesting that their guests had gone mad. The Shadow Dragon clan swears its undying loyalty to you, my liege. Our lives are yours to take. Shadow Dragon clan? Gods. Now I understand why Dad stays cooped up in the castle all day. Zorith told Bitra with an air spell to not let anyone else hear her. And you dared say that you're not beautiful. You're a god now. Bitra giggled in reply. You'll never let me hear the end of this, don't you? Zorith said with a sigh. Nope. Now invite me to dinner. We have many things to celebrate tonight. Griffin Kingdom, Keller region, inside Litha's tower a few months later. For once, life seemed to have listened to Litha's plea and nothing big had happened ever since his fight with Dawn. It had given him the opportunity to spend a lot of time with his now many nieces and nephews, with Celia and his own family. Thanks to the fact that he finished his rounds early, he always had a lot of free time that he could use to catch up with both his old and new allies, while also assessing his gains. After finishing the academy and coming of age, Lith had joined the army in the hope of finding some clues about how to solve his reincarnation problem. Gaining merits with the army had given him the chance to access all the books he needed for his research. He had chosen to become a ranger to always work alone in the Keller region as his patrol area after asking Kala for advice. The region was rich in lost cities that had allowed him to further study cursed objects and explore the possibility of binding his soul to an item. Also, it was the motherland of the ODI, notorious body snatchers, and the forefathers of lichhood. On paper, it was the perfect place to find a way to either swap his dying body with a new one or at least gain further insight on liches, the allegedly perfect undead. Lith would have never thought of actually meeting, fighting, and interacting with all of them, even befriending a lich named Zalgrish. That or whatever such raving mad undead passed as friendship. During those 2 years, Lith had gained a lot and learned even more. He now was sure that turning himself into a cursed object was impossible. Just like it happened for corpses when they were risen as greater undead, the living legacies had a mind, if not a soul, of their own. On top of that, lichhood had lost most of its luster after noticing how mad each one of them became. Even Kala, who was barely halfway through the process, wasn't an exception. Discovering that liches couldn't get too far away from their phylactery without losing their powers had been the final nail in the coffin. His visit in Kula had given Lith the means to replicate the workings of the ODI, of which he had personally experienced their performance, and opened more questions about Mogur's role in his world tribulations. Lith had never planned on meeting someone like Camilla, who he initially considered just a fling, nor to reconnect with Protector or meeting Naurand. His relationship with Camilla had grown slowly but steadily since their first date, to the point that she was aware of both his hybrid and awakened nature. She only ignored the part about him being from Earth and about Solas's existence, making her the only person outside his family with whom he had been completely honest and who didn't rip his secrets out of his mind. Protector had helped him a lot to grow as both a man and a mage, introducing Lith to Faluel. As for Naurand, Lith had at first spared him only on Solas's whim, but after the Razar had helped to save Rena's children and had offered to teach him light mastery, Lith had started caring for him. Mostly because Naurand was his only lead about fringes, mystical places where he could speak with Mogur. Such knowledge, coupled with light mastery, made the Razar a priceless asset. Lith was sitting at his desk while contemplating the lost academy of Huriol from one of the tower's windows. Now that Solas's mana core had reached the deep Cyan core, she had unlocked the second floor of the Mage Tower. This is our last opportunity to raid the academy and get our hands on that sweet forge made of Davris. Once we are done with the army, we'll lose our privileges. Lith said, well, we've raided it more than 100 times, yet we have found the forge mastering lab only once, when we took the runesmithing booklet. Solus said. Also, if we stumble again into the Emerald Dragon, we might die. I love the smell of pessimism in the morning. Lith chuckled at her lack of enthusiasm. Look at the bright side. We've yet no idea how to remove the Davros Forge from the ground. We don't speak the Draconic language, so we have no way to communicate with the dragon, and we're relying solely on dumb luck for Huriel's maze to rearrange itself in a convenient way. What bright side are you talking about? What you said sounded like the recipe for a disaster. Solus said. Because it is. The bright side is that after our honorable discharge, we're done cleaning other people's mess, be they past, present, or future. Our apprenticeship with Faluel will take place on our terms, and once we're part of the Beast Council, we'll be free to go wherever we want and do whatever we want. Lith steepled his fingers, planning what he considered the last steps of his journey. Chapter 954 Raiders of the Lost Academy Part 2. I've packed everything we might need and put all the ancient dictionaries Faluel has borrowed us inside Soluspedia. This time, we should be able to read the ancient language of the kingdom as if we're native speakers. Solus had even found the time to finish translating the runesmithing booklet. She and Lith had revised its contents multiple times, hoping that it would speed up their study of modern runesmithing with Faluel. Their only gripe with the booklet was the lack of blueprints for truly powerful artifacts. Yet it was supposed to be just a school textbook, not the grimoire of an archmage, so the discovery had only mildly disappointed them. Lith studied the Lost Academy one last time before turning the tower into a ring and warping to his destination. From the outside, Huriel looked like a giant stone dome. The only entrances were located at the ground level, and breaking the dome would make the cursed object who protected the city turn the academy into a rampaging golem. Flying inside was impossible as well, making people wonder what lay at the center of the city and for what purpose an academy had been built in the middle of nowhere. Huriel was also nicknamed the Cursed Training Ground. Lith used his badge to open the field of several overlapping arrays that prevented everything and everyone from stepping through the city's borders. The Lost City was a living labyrinth that would periodically rearrange itself, making any old map useless. Its walls couldn't be affected by earth magic, dimensional magic was sealed, and destroying the walls to make haste only made the living legacy that ruled over Huriel angry. The labyrinth made finding something of value inside the Lost Academy a bet for Lith, but the same applied to the creatures trapped inside Huriel who kept trying to reach the exit to regain their freedom. Jakra the Emerald Dragon was among one of its most famous and powerful inhabitants. Unlike other academies, Huriel lacked a forest, but made up for it by hosting all kind of creatures, both living and undead. Who the fuck could be so mad to let a bunch of horny teens sleep in the same dormitory, with no privacy nor supervision, living under the same roof of unspeakable horrors? Lith had no idea who had devised Huriel, but was pretty sure to know why modern academies were nothing like it. Beats me. Solus shrugged. I'm eager to put to the test War's abilities. So far, we faced only C-listers unworthy of its blade. With a bit of luck, this will be our last fight for a long while. The bastard sword crafted by Orion hung on Lith's hip, inside the scabbard made from the blood of the last man dumb enough to force Lith to unsheath war. That makes the two of us. Let's hope we don't end up testing its limits instead. Lith cursed at himself 1 second after the thought formed in his mind. I swear, if you jinxed our last raid before it even started, I'm going to leave you spend your last weeks in the army alone while I take a vacation on my own. Solus thought. Lith silently agreed and started to dispose of the creatures that were hitting the barriers sealing the city with their best spells. It was a small group of famished undead, hence Lith didn't even try to communicate with them. Their bodies were skeletal due to the lack of nourishment, but like all Huriel's prisoners, they couldn't die. For some unknown reason, nothing except for enchanted weapons and spells could destroy the physical form of those who remained trapped in the Lost Academy for too long. By my maker, no matter how many times they faced them, the combat prowess the undead displayed despite their pitiful condition always managed to amaze Solus. Every one of their movements was flawless, allowing them to dodge Lith's attacks by just shifting their stance. Yet they fell the moment one of the spells stored inside Lith's rings disrupted their teamwork. No matter how skilled they were, their starving bodies couldn't keep up with a strong and fresh opponent. Lith only needed to graze them with war for the violent energies imbued inside the sword to ravage its victims and turning them into ashes. To make matters worse for the enemies, during his raids Lith would use death vision to spot the enemy's weakness. Humans could die in so many ways that Lith's curse was useless against them, whereas undead could only die from darkness magic or if struck at their weak points. Their bodies would unravel starting from there. So death vision provided Lith with clues about how to defeat even creatures he had never met before. The small ash clouds didn't disperse, but became small whirls that were sucked inside a small gate. They would be reborn in a random spot of the city during the next cycle. Heriol was also known as the Deathless City because its inhabitants were forced into a seemingly unbreakable death and rebirth cycle. Some speculated that those who managed to leave the city's premises might be freed from such a cruel destiny, but no one was willing to take risks and allow it to happen. How long until the reset? Lith thought. About 10 hours. The fact that they managed to escape in barely 2 hours means that either they were very lucky or that this time Heriol arranged itself in a straightforward path. If I'm right, we might be forced to face a lot of enemies. Solus thought. It also means we might get further than ever. Even if we miss the forge, maybe we'll find something more easily portable. Lith said. Dimensional and earth magic were sealed inside Heriol, so he couldn't access his pocket dimension nor widen the doors to make way for bulky loot. Once they walked through the city gates, they found themselves in what looked like a kitchen where someone had tried to butcher a still-alive bull. The stone counters were cracked in many places, the cooking utensils were deformed as if they had been used to hit something very hard, and there was blood everywhere. What the fuck did we just miss? Lith wondered. Heriol fixed and cleaned all kinds of damage the moment they happened, making the kitchen return to its original appearance at a speed visible to the naked eye. Whatever happened in there, it was likely to have wrecked the room and taken place barely a minute ago. The kitchen only had a way in and a way out, so after checking around with life vision, Lith moved forward. The next room was a long corridor leading to a single door. Both of its side walls were covered by huge paintings perfectly lined up. Lith froze in place, trying to understand the purpose of the room. In all of his visits, he had never found something as trivial as a passageway. Whoever had built the city seemed to hate wasting space, so every part of the building had a specific role in the Lost Academy, no matter if it was a bathroom or a classroom. Life vision revealed that the paintings were all enchanted with some kind of dimensional magic, yet they depicted still life scenes of no relevance. Or so Lith thought until he recognized some of them. Wait a second, we've been there in the past. Could this really be some sort of waypoint to quick travel through the city? Chapter 9, 55 Raiders of the Lost Academy Part 3. Lith used Invigoration on a painting to study its pseudo-core and discovered that it had very simple controls. Honestly, I hope the paintings are no-dimensional doors. If you're right, we might get swarmed at any minute. Also, we have no idea how many times these things can be used. If we go in too deep and then we find their pseudo-core spent on our way back, we'd have no way out of Heriol. Solus thought while keeping her mana sense active. Lith shuddered, realizing how foolish was his wish. Luckily, the dimensional magic inside of the paintings wasn't intended as a mean of transportation. By imprinting the paintings with his mana, Lith could solely explore the rooms they depicted, zooming in and out at will. This is some kind of camera's control room, he thought. After fiddling with the controls for a while, Lith discovered that the zoom-out function allowed him to see where each room was in Heriol and the directions it led to. That's how those guys managed to get out so quickly. Solus pointed him at a painting depicting another corridor filled with surveillance canvas. Some of the images had been arranged so to form a path leading outside. The good news is that we can follow their lead and move faster. The bad news is that whoever stumbles into that corridor will find a way out and mess with our plan. Lith was zooming out all the surveillance images in the room to see if any of them led to the forge mastering or the alchemical lab. Unfortunately for him, most of the depicted areas were disconnected between them, so they provided him with no clues where to go and hit the jackpot. My advice is to follow the path of the undead. It will allow us to both move quickly and get rid of all those who might block our way back. 2 birds with 1 stone. Solus suggested. Lith nodded and studied briefly all the paintings before moving out. He stayed in each room only long enough to give Solus the time to scan everything with mana sense for valuable relics. No matter how many times he visited it, Huriel was always creepy. The place reminded Lith of the White Griffin Academy to the point that he could almost see the students sitting in the classrooms, practicing magic in the labs, and bullying the weak in the bathrooms. Yet everything was empty and silent until it wasn't anymore. For some reason, all doors would stay closed until someone opened them, and each room was soundproof. Enemies would come at any time from any direction without notice. Lith left the bathroom and entered the Gardens of Madness. He had already been there in the past, but this time he knew where to go next. The garden area was one of the biggest he had ever met, with so many doors that even Solus needed a map to not lose her way. They spanned for several hundreds of meters, covering an area as big as a small village. It was also one of the most dangerous places in the Lost Academy. A green area meant plants, which in turn meant food, and food was a priceless luxury inside Huriel. Those who reached the gardens would never leave until killed and would react to any intruder with extreme prejudice. Yet the place hadn't been named after the violence it caused so much as after what happened once one of the landlords had their belly full for a while. Finally freed from their hunger, humans, magical beasts, and undead alike would be torn apart between their need for company and the fear of losing what they had. Lith had witnessed several times them crying like babies while hugging, having sex, or even eating each other alive. Only a few would live long enough to realize they had just exchanged one hell for another and would resume their search for the exit. All the others would remain trapped mind and body in the Gardens of Madness. Lith used air magic to float a few centimeters from the ground and darkness magic to cancel his smell. His skinwalker armor changed its colors according to its surroundings, making Lith nigh invisible. While moving through the gardens, Lith left several bombs hidden inside small bags, just in case he needed to retreat quickly and had no time for finesse nor violence. The next room was a 7-story tall library, filled to the brim with books. Too bad we can't use the tower's sentries to check their titles, nor can we just store them inside our pocket dimension. Lith inwardly sighed at the idea of the treasure of knowledge he was leaving behind. It would take hours anyway. Solus replied, "This place must belong to a time when dimensional items weren't common. Misplace a book even once, and it's as good as lost forever." She skimmed the titles of the tomes they met on their way, but they were either trivial or nonsensical, like Basics of Self-Defense or How to Cook Your Neighbor. If the gardens extended horizontally, the library extended vertically, like a tower comprised of bookshelves. Lith was surprised not meeting anyone on his way and believed that for once luck was smiling upon him. Yet the truth was much worse. Undead were the only ones capable of building long-lasting alliance among themselves simply because they couldn't feed upon each other. Emperor beasts, humans, and plants, instead, would welcome even their own kin as if they were steaming cheeseburgers. Guilt was a meaningless word in Huriel since the victim would be reborn in a few hours. After living inside the Lost Academy for a few days, the only feeling that mattered was hunger. "Congratulations," said a male voice when Lith reached the end of the known path. "You've reached the headmaster's office and earned your place in the Ardhan Academy." Lith had no idea if to be more creeped out by the person in front of him speaking the modern common language or by hearing the name of the Mad King spoken with deference instead of spite. The man in front of Lith wore an ample golden mage robe and was about 1.60 meters, 5 feet 3 inches tall. He looked to be in his mid-50s and had long brown hair and beard streaked red all over. "How do you speak my language, and what the heck are you talking about?" Lith said while pretending to be scared. Solus, analysis. He actually thought while using the chatter to weave his best spells. Whoever this guy is, he has a bright violet mana core and a life force, so he's human. Yet he shares the same energy signature of Huriel, so I'm afraid we're actually talking with the host of the living legacy that controls the place. Be extra careful. If he's anything like me, you're speaking with the beast to whom belongs the belly you're inside of. Solus prepared some spells of her own while trying to understand if the cursed object had any weakness she could exploit. Many people reach our institution every year, and no matter how long they stay, they talk, and talk. I had all the time I needed to listen and keep up with the outside world. At a wave of the apparently amiable old man, A hologram of Lith talking with General Vorg appeared in the middle of the room. Chapter 956 Raiders of the Lost Academy Part 4. Ranger Verhin, you'll remain here until the next reset, Vorg's hologram said, making Lith aware that the living legacy had kept an eye on him ever since his first visit in Huriol. Then, the images changed, showing a montage of all his previous visits. The sequence highlighted Lith's battle tactics, his ability to shapeshift into his wormling form and cast true magic. More than a polite introduction, it sounded like a threat. As for what I'm talking about, I'm offering you to enroll in the final academy, the Golden Griffin. The man raised his hands, and the entire room started to glow with power. The light coming out of the walls surrounded Lith as if it wanted to seep inside his body, but his enchanted armor and strong mana flow kept it at bay. My name is Hister Savinus, born from the fusion of the headmaster of the 7th Academy and its very power core. I hope we will get along. The man said, Thanks, but no thanks. Been there, done that. I think it's better if I leave now. Lith moved toward the door, but its outline disappeared and became one with the wall. What's the rush? There is still plenty of time before the next reset. The gods only know why the king never entrusted me with the power of making it happen at will. I've lost so many promising students because of Arthan's short-sightedness, Hister said, while making 2 comfortable chairs appear. Solus. Lith refused to sit down. If Huriol worked like his tower, the chair could easily turn out to be a deadly trap. Don't worry, the corridor is still there, and the wall hasn't changed its thickness. Get ready to move on my mark. She thought. Why should I accept? This place is a dreadful prison, whereas the entirety of Mogar is up for the taking. Lith had to keep the conversation going. Otherwise his host might activate arrays that would make his escape more difficult. As all those who came in the past, dear Verhin, you're letting fear cloud your judgment. This is no prison, but the birthplace of the final army that will make Arthan's dream of conquering the entire Garland continent come true. Where others just see a bunch of people forced to become cannibalistic psychopaths, Arthan saw the possibility to create a battlefield where death has no place. Our students can practice their tactics until they perfect or discard them. They learn how to distinguish true friends from those who instead would betray them for a bowl of soup. Here there is no such thing as fatal mistakes. You can really learn how to improvise, adapt, and overcome any adversity. Your research needs dragon's blood? We have a dragon. Even if we bleed him out, he'll just be reborn. The same stands for phoenixes, unicorns, and any rare ingredient you might ever need. Here at the Golden Griffin, everyone can make the extreme sacrifice for their country over and over again. More than a pitch, Hister's words sounded like the rant of a madman. The basic concept was interesting, but the total lack of free will to join the experiment or of any safe words to cover it made Huriol no different from a prison camp used to conduct human experimentation. As our guest, I allowed you to pick a few souvenirs. But if you enroll and graduate, I'll award you with this. The headmaster made the image of the Davros Forge appear in front of Lith's eyes. What do you mean, graduate? Lith licked his lips with a greedy light in his eyes. All you have to do is to stay here until the reset, reach the exit, and then escape the pesky arrays that block me here. You'll be awarded extra points if you deactivate them. Would you be interested in a full suit of dragon-scale armor? Hister said, Well, when you put it this way. Mark. Solus cut Lith short and made the shortest path to the exit appear in front of his eyes. Bye. Lith charged at the point where once the door had been while boosting his armor with mana and activating the spirit barrier ring at the same time. The combined effect of the artifacts turned him into a living battering ram that smashed through the solid stone wall without wasting a single spell. Lith could always regain mana with invigoration, whereas weaving new spells would take him time. How dare you ruin my school? Come children, lunch is ready. Hister sent the living light after Lith while all the doors of the Golden Griffin leading toward the exit opened at the same time, guiding the hunters toward their prey. The walls of the academy came to life and took the form of golems. Unlike those from Kula, they were made only of stone. The golems had no head nor neck. Their eyes were on their ample chest, making them look like humanoid manta rays. They were slow, but their number was so great that the moment Lith slowed down, he would be drowned in their stone limbs. By the time he was out of the girls' locker room and back into the canteen, Lith finally understood the real meaning of the headmaster's last words. The floor was filled with golems, and the tables with steaming piles of gruel, probably made from the latest batch of fallen students. The stench made Lith turn his nose up to it, but to the rest of the inmates the meal smelled like heaven. All kinds of creatures swarmed from all sides of the academy, following the aroma to the canteen where Lith was fighting for his life. War cut deep inside the golem stone thanks to its enchantment scrambling their defenses and allowing Lith to make short work of the golems. After the events of Kulla, Orion had modified his crafting method so that his loved ones would never be cornered by a construct again. Both Ruin and War were capable of absorbing mana from nearby spells, which included the arrays that animated the golems. War, however, was much more efficient so that the moment it struck a construct, the earth magic that made it impervious to all kinds of damage faltered. With each slash, the angry blade pierced the golem's external armor and reached their power cores, turning them into rubble. It would have been an impossible feat if not for Life Vision revealing the weak point to Lith and War allowing him to exploit it. The bastard sword emitted a screech akin to a battle cry while it absorbed the power core's lingering energies and made them go haywire. The golem exploded, freeing War and repelling the other assailants without letting a single piece of rock hit Lith. Fuck me sideways. Whoever pissed Orion off this much has better to entrust their soul to the gods, because I'm pretty sure they will soon meet their makers. Lith thought while clearing his path toward the exit. I have good news. Solus said. Even though each golem you destroy is quickly replaced, their creation is weakening Hister's energy signature in both the walls and the light that is chasing us. Behind them, the canteen had plunged into chaos. The living fought for the food, the undead fought to eat the living, while the weakest of the prisoner feasted on their fallen colleagues. Only the constructs kept chasing their prey relentlessly, yet Lith's situation had become much worse nonetheless. Chapter 957 Sometimes They Come Back Part 1. Please, Solus, save the fancy words for later and tell why Hister's energy signature weakening matters now. Lith thought while activating full guard. Not even Solus could follow so many targets at the same time, and he couldn't afford to be taken by surprise. Stray spells flew throughout the room, limiting his space of maneuver, and the moment one of the Golden Griffin's inmates spotted Lith, they would chase him with haunted eyes as if he was a juicy prime rib on a barbecue. It matters because, unlike what happened when we tried to take the Davros Forge or when Jakra the Dragon used Origin Flames, the building is not coming to life. My guess is that Ardhan didn't trust Hister enough to give him full control of the academy. He admitted that Huriol has rules that even he has to follow. As long as you don't break any of them, he has to consume his own power. Solus said. The Living Legacy didn't lie about the academy offering the possibility to train endlessly, about how those trapped inside the Golden Griffin could sharpen and polish their skill to the utmost limit. Each one of them was a fierce opponent with hundreds of years of battle experience and no care for their survival. They had fought the whole time while being famished, wounded, and sometimes even maimed. Hister's students had learned how to mess their own spells up on purpose, to detonate along with the enemy and turn themselves into living bombs. Lith cursed his bad luck when an explosion sent him crashing on the ground. He had sustained no damage, but the constructs had finally the opportunity to pile up on him and unleash their best spells in unison. Lith let them form a small mound that covered him from sight and from the ensuing chaos so that the students would turn against each other. The spirit barrier ring required a lot of mana to sustain such weight and block the spells that were raining down on it, but Lith could afford it thanks to invigoration. Once Life Vision showed him that the coast was clear, Lith expanded the barrier and sent the golems flying. He used his wings and air magic to fly faster than a bullet, reaching the Gardens of Madness in 2 flaps. The route Solus had traced for him required to cut through the middle of the park, offering him no cover. The golems from the canteen followed him, and new ones emerged from the garden's walls. To make matters worse, those skilled enough to become the landlords of the green area were well fed and rested. Some even had followers. They were a much greater threat than their starving peers. Time to trigger the detonator. A snap of Lith's finger made all the small bags he had hidden inside the bushes open, releasing their delicious smell. The bombs he had prepared were actually steaming delicacies that he conserved inside his pocket dimension. The bags were something he had devised for places like Belius or Huriol, where dimensional items didn't work. They would keep the food warm and fragrant. Even the garden's landlords didn't have a hot meal in decades, let alone those who found the canteen's disgusting gruel tasty. The food frenzy made everyone go insane, fighting with their life on the line just to get one bite. The students ignored Lith, who kept away from the bags, and ground the golems into dust simply because the constructs were on their path. Lith kept flapping his wings, moving as fast as he could toward the exit. He didn't really have 10 hours left, but barely a few minutes. It was the time it would take Hister to gather his troops and beat Lith with sheer numbers and power. Damn it all, Lith yelled when he found the surveillance canvas room jam-packed with golems. They stood one on top of the other, those above fusing their legs with the flat head of those below, forming a living barricade capable of grabbing, hitting, and using magic. A hail of stones filled the entirety of the corridor, forcing Lith to a halt. He activated the Tier 5 magic holding ring, unleashing both the final sunsets stored within. Lith focused the two spells into a single pillar of black flames that vaporized the enemy's spells and pierced through their ranks, creating a path. I take back what I said in the past about Tier 5 magic holding rings. I need more of these babies, Lith thought. He entered the kitchen, finding that it was even more packed than the corridor, but this time Lith was ready. Until that moment, Lith had been forced to hold back to not damage the academy with stray spells and trigger its defenses. He hadn't forgotten how the Golden Griffin was so powerful to stop even Jakra the Emerald Dragon. The last time they had met, the ancient creature had failed to escape because his origin flames damaged the walls. Lith had learned from Jakra's mistake, and Solas's earlier words confirmed his theory. The golems, the food, everything was just a ruse to make him go all out and break the Academy's rules so that Hister could become all-powerful. Now, however, the exit was in sight, so he could safely unleash all the spells he had at the ready. The entire kitchen blew up, opening a hole in the Golden Griffin walls. By the time the safety protocols triggered, however, Lith was already outside, using his amulet to open the array. No, you don't. Hister warped in front of Lith while focusing all of his might into a gravity spell that sucked him back into the Lost Academy. A jet stream of bright blue origin flames burned the headmaster to a crisp, while an emerald creature so fast that it was barely a blur pushed Lith through the fissure in the energy barrier before it reached for the sky. Freedom at last. Jakra rejoiced as he could finally breathe fresh air for the first time in centuries. He had remained trapped inside Huriol a long time ago, back when he was young and stupid enough to believe himself invincible. Little did he know that even though the Golden Griffin gave him plenty of experience and made him immortal, it also stopped his aging. It was the reason why he was still stuck with a bright blue core despite having mastered origin flames and true magic to the point of almost self-awaken. Dragons only grew stronger with time, so eternal youth was a curse to them. Thanks, little brother. Now I need a proper meal, a year-long nap, and a month-long bath. After that, I'll learn your language and thank you properly. Jakra knew that, as long as Lith didn't understand his words, any attempt to communicate would turn into a pointless fight. Having nothing to offer but his promise, the dragon spat on the Golden Griffin before warping away. He must have followed you the whole time, hiding behind the golems. Solas thought. I failed to notice his presence as well. There were too many enemies and dangers to care about a quiet in the backlands. Yeah. Hister opened all the rooms leading to my position, so Jakra had a clear path to follow. The headmaster didn't even consider the idea that someone might be still sane and exploit his call to arms to escape. Lith thought. Chapter 958 Sometimes They Come Back Part 2. Do you think I should mention this in my report? You better do. Jakra's escape was just a matter of time, whereas the knowledge about Huriol's true purpose will help the kingdom to better defend from it. With Thrud still at large and most of the knowledge about Arton lost, they need to know that the Mad King left the ultimate army as a gift for his granddaughter. Solas said, I bet that General Vor will be pretty pissed off anyway. Lith sighed. Grand Duchy of Dyrus household. During Lith's escape from Huriol, it had been a long time since Journey Ernest had reached out to her old friend, Archmage Velan Dyrus. Right after Uriel's death, Velan's son and the fifth member of Litha's academy group, the relationship between the Urnas and the Dyrus households became awkward. The slave ring Nalier had put it Quilla's finger had forced her to cut the young mage's throat, and it had been Florio's decision to heal her mother first that led to Uriel's demise. Velan considered them responsible, and as a mother, Journey couldn't blame him. After a while, the two families had made peace. Yet Archmage Dyrus had never recovered from the loss of his only beloved son and suitable heir. Velan had many children, but they were all as bad as they came. The Dyrus household was a loveless place, so everyone only cared about themselves and about enjoying the luxuries that their noble status offered. Uriel's siblings had no passion for magic and no love for their subjects. Making any of them the next ruler of the region would be akin to put a fox guarding a henhouse. Velan had searched for someone to adopt, but talented mages were very rare, and he didn't have much time. After a while, Archmage Dyrus resigned to his bloodline, ending with him. He started to spend all of his time either in his lab or putting things in order for the families that would take his place once his Grand Duchy would be split into smaller lands. Journey and Orion had called to offer him their help multiple times and visited him whenever they could, just to find Velan's amulet offline and his doors closed. All the more reason why Journey was surprised to receive an audience with him in her time of need. After over a year, Floria's trial was at a standstill and her career was ruined. Lith had already become a captain as well and was likely to be promoted again before his discharge. Even Camilla had surpassed Floria in terms of ranks after becoming a royal constable and being appointed as Journey's personal aide. Captain Yeval had no backers nor talent for magic, but she was smart and loyal. Journey had all the power a magical household could have. What she lacked were true friends. Having someone trustworthy watching her back was a priceless asset that made Camilla vital to her plans. Yet a simple aid wasn't enough to solve Floria's problem. Journey needed to bring the most powerful bloodlines of the kingdom on her side, and Velan would make a fine addition. The royals were doing all they could, but politics were a poisoned drink. Exposing themselves too much to help the Urnas would set a dangerous precedent and be perceived as favoritism. Journey and Orion had to play their part to solve the situation or risk alienating their lifelong allies. Long time no see, Journey. Velan tried to smile, but his face failed him. There was not a shred of joy left in his heart, and he was too tired to fake a feeling he didn't experience in years. He was a man in his late 50s, about 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, tall, with red hair and a beard. Brown streaks showed his talent for earth magic that had made him an archmage, whereas gray streaks, due to grief and age, made him look older than he was. What brings you to my door today? We are not friends anymore, Velan, so let's skip the part where you pretend to care about my problems and I to feign ignorance. You know exactly why I'm here. I want you to stop what you're doing. Journey wore a warm smile that extended to her eyes. Unlike Velan, she never revealed her true face until she was ready to deliver the finishing blow. Lady Journey Urnas was a petite woman, barely 1.52 centimeters, 5 feet, tall, with blonde hair that extended midway down her back and sapphire blue eyes. She wore a beautiful light green day dress worthy of the court, and her hair was perfectly curled, framing her face like she had been taken out of a painting. She was in her early 40s. But thanks to proper care and good genes, she looked like she was in her mid-30s, giving her the allure of a mature yet youthful woman. Many had mistaken her frilly appearance with her real self, and most of them died for it. What am I doing exactly? Velan furrowed his brows. An old butler in a black livery served them one of the finest teas in the kingdom. You're a lucky man, Velan. Or maybe you just timed your attack well. It doesn't matter. The point is that, without that goddamn undead invasion and all the spy work for the imminent colonization of the Giera continent, we would have had this conversation months ago. Once I could finally stop for a moment and think, it didn't take me much to unravel the mystery behind my daughter's predicament. The royals are already on my side, and so are most of the ancient magical bloodlines. They know all too well the price for standing in my path, and striking the Urnas down would set a very dangerous precedent for them. It would mean setting a glass ceiling past which anyone must be shot down, themselves included. Hence, whoever was prolonging that pointless drama had to be someone from a young, yet very powerful household. Someone who could use the massacre of Kulla to stir the still open wounds left by Lookert's attempts to trigger a civil war. Someone who is respected and well received. A leading figure who has suffered a terrible loss and never got justice for it despite his countless merits. Someone like you, Journey said. You are too kind. Velan dropped the facade, letting all the rage he harbored toward the Urnas twist his face in a snarl of rage. I admit that I would have never pulled it off if your daughter didn't manage to get so many valuable professors from the young magical bloodline slaughtered. You old coots can afford to lose one heir or two because the foundation of your power is solid. Remaining mageless is nothing but a temporary setback for you, whereas it can spell the end for us commoners. His voice was amiable, yet every word of his was soaked in venom and spite. Also, I need to thank both you and your daughter for providing me such a valuable helper. Do you remember the young Calian, I presume? At a snap of his fingers, the door of the tea room opened and revealed the presence of a second guest. Calian Nuragor was a handsome man in his early 20s, about 1.8 meters, 5 feet 11 inches, tall with pitch black hair and gray eyes. He had a lean but muscular build that not even his ample mage robe could hide. Chapter 959, Different Games Part 1. Calian Nuragor had been Floria's boyfriend for a while, and after Lith had publicly humiliated him, the young man had trained his body as well as his magic without ever taking a single day of rest. Mage Nuragor, what a pleasant surprise. I'm curious to understand the role you played in Velan's little charade. Journey welcomed him with a simple nod of her head, without even bothering to stand up. It's great Mage Nuragor to you, Lady Ernest. Calian clenched his fist so hard that his knuckles turned white. He held his rage back only because he knew that from that distance, despite the difference in their build, height, and age, Journey could hand his ass to him with only one hand. Attacking Journey would only give her a plausible excuse to kill him. 1 year of training was nothing compared to a lifetime on the field. Great mage. She giggled like an airhead noble dame. Calian must have done a pretty good job if you spent the gold necessary to buy a 2-bits mage like him such title. All about Journey from her tempo to her tone of voice was studied to provoke her opponents. Both Velan and Calian knew it, but only the former had the cold blood to remain unfazed by her disrespectful words. Being called a talentless mage that needed to bribe his way into the Mage Association brought him seconds away from attacking her, but Velan beat him to the punch, sending him flying with a wave of his hand. Forgive him. Youth makes people slaves of their instincts to the point of being stupid. Velan sighed, while keeping his left forefinger raised, and Calian nailed to the wall to save his life. For stupid he is stupid. How did he help you exactly? Journey giggled again, taking another sip of her tea. Disgruntled daughters need to vent with someone about their meddling parents. Velan chuckled, making Journey's smile disappear. Boyfriends make an excellent shoulder to lean on. You wouldn't believe how many things a young woman is willing to share, especially during pillow talk. Moreover, you are underestimating Calian. After your birthday party, he worked hard as if he had to prove the whole Mogre wrong, achieving such feats that it only took me a few good words here and a bit of gold there to make him into a great mage. Can you say the same about your daughters or your good-for-nothing sons? No, because everything my children got, they achieved it on their own. Journey restored her poker face while her brain spun at top gear to understand all the innuendos of their conversation. Force my hand, and it will not just be your daughter's career at stake, but also her reputation, along with that of the Ernest household. Velan said, if you really have such power over me, why there's no rumor going around, yet? Journey asked. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. We can still settle our scores peacefully. Velan emptied his cup and magically refilled it. Interesting. You invested all this time and resources just to show off your influence over the royal court. I must assume you're about to ask me a heavy ransom. Journey didn't bother asking what he wanted. She was sure Velan would tell her of his own will. I only ask for what is rightfully mine. Archmage Dyrus almost lost it when she called him a thief. I want no ransom, just Wergild for my son. You can either disown Quilla, so that I can make her face justice without the protection of the Urna's name, or give me Floria, so that I can adopt her. I beg your pardon. Journey raised an eyebrow in disbelief. A child for a child, as simple as that. Quilla killed my Uriel, so it's only fair for me to do the same. The only other acceptable solution is that you give me an heir. Floria's career is already over, and she's an embarrassment for your household. No one could blame you for getting rid of her, while I would take her in the name of our old friendship. Floria would have her reputation back, and the Dirus would thrive. It would be an excellent opportunity to show to the whole kingdom that old and new magical bloodline can work together for the greater good. Everybody wins. Velan said. Not at all. It would be only you to emerge victorious. Disowning Quilla would make my household lose a powerful mage and her future heirs, while if I gave you Floria, the moment something happens to Orion or me, you could make a claim over the Ernaz's magical legacy. Let me guess, you're planning to marry her with great mage Nuragor, correct? Journey put down her teacup and stood up, ready to leave. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Lady Ernaz. Archmage Dirus stood up as well, to be able to keep looking down on her thanks to the height difference between them. You've guessed everything right except for the last part. I would never mix my blood with a traitor. I'm grateful to Callahan for his services, and I've properly compensated him for it. But I think the Dirus household's heir deserves a husband who doesn't switch sides out of petty grudges. Callahan turned pale at those words, realizing that the reason why Velan never released him from the spell that nailed him to the wall wasn't to protect him so much as out of spite. You are counting your chickens before they hatch. The Dirus household will die with you because I'm not going to give up on either of my daughters. I'll see you in the court. Journey turned around and walked toward the door. That's what I'm counting on, Velan said, making her stop. Go ahead. You can search even my private property without a warrant. I've always followed the law, so your role as an Archon will do you no good. A rage bordering on madness lit his eyes. You know, I've tried to bring down Lith as well, but that monster has no openings. I had him searched after the ogre's crystal incident. I made sure that everyone in the north knew who he was and what he did, yet he never lost control. I failed to get him discharged after Kulla only because, unlike Floria, he belongs to no one, so everyone wants a piece of him. The royals, the army, the mages, the old and new household. All of them want to reel him and refuse to support me. To make matters worse, Mirim Distar keeps protecting Lith, and bypassing the authority of the Lord Commander of the Queen's Corps is no easy feat. You knew about her real role in the court and still dare to make a move? For the second time in less than an hour, Velan Dirus had managed to surprise Journey. Of course I know. I served in the Corps as long as your husband. Velan sneered. Once Lith leaves the army to join those filthy beasts, however, all those who protected him so far will either turn their back to him or simply lose the authority to help him. I'm telling you all of this in the hope you listen to reason and do the right thing. I know you care about Lith enough to groom that little wench of his, and believe me, once I'm done with you, he'll be the next on my list. Chapter 9, 60 Different Games Part 2. There's nothing you can do to protect your daughter, let alone a grassroots mage who's this close to being considered a traitor for turning his back to the kingdom in its hour of need against the undead. The incoming storm will end both their lives, yet you have the power to spare them from such a cruel destiny. Give me what I want, and all will be well. I'll show myself out. Farewell, Velan. Journey's voice was shaken as she walked through the door with wavering steps. Only once she was certain no one was following her along the corridor and Orion's buttons didn't detect any surveillance spell, did she regain her confidence. Her worried grimace disappeared and was replaced by a stone-cold face. Did you get everything, dear? She said in her communication earpiece. Yes, it's almost exactly as you predicted, only that now we have Velan saying it with his own voice instead of just another of your paranoid theories. Orion inwardly cursed at those who had refused to take his wife seriously due to the lack of proof. I'm not worried about Velan, so much as about Callahan. That little runt needs a lesson. Make sure that Mirim hears the recording. In this game, she is our queen. Journey closed the call and made sure to retrace her steps. Lady Ernaz collected the small beads she had left on her way in before someone could notice them. All the important households were protected by dimensional ceiling arrays that prevented eavesdropping, the use of communication amulets, and even recording devices. Communication earpieces, however, didn't rely on dimensional magic to work, but only on air magic. They transmitted the sound without recording it. It was the reason why they had a short range that made them useful for small teams on recon missions, but not for spy works. Journey, however, had placed several relays that had transmitted her conversation with Velan to the other receiver in Camilla's ear. She was waiting outside the array's area of effect, with Journey's communication amulet in one hand and a signal amplifier in the other. The setup had allowed Orion to listen and record everything even though he was hundreds of kilometers away, giving Velan's spies the opportunity to keep an eye on him. Once she left the Dyrus household, Journey thanked Camilla for her help and the gods for giving her a deputy she could trust. Velan would have never felt confident enough to spill the beans if Lady Erna's brought along a member of her family. That's why Journey had made sure all her relatives were in places where Velan's spies could find and follow them easily. Journey was known to trust no one, and putting such knowledge in the hands of someone who could exploit it to their ends was a gamble that Archmage Dyrus knew Journey would never take. Yet it was exactly what she had done. Velan Dyrus was a brilliant man who had worked hard all his life and became an Archmage before he was even 40. He had achieved such a feat thanks to his talent for magic and his political ingenuity that allowed him to be at least 5 steps ahead of his competition. Journey Ernas, however, was a manipulator from a bloodline of manipulators who had mastered human interaction as it was a martial art. Be it politics, relationships, or work, Lady Ernas had learned from a tender age that just staying ahead was pointless. Journey knew that the only way no opponent could ever beat her was if she wasn't even playing their same game. Once she got back to Belius, Captain Yeval was still shaken from the revelation that it was Archmage Dyrus behind all the disciplinary notes in Litha's file and the cold reception he had received during his service as a ranger despite his outstanding performance. I don't know what's worse. Whether to know that there is such a huge threat on the horizon or not being able to tell Lith until I meet him in person. Lady Ernas insisted that no channel is safe enough, and she was damn right from the beginning. Camilla thought. She walked through the familiar halls of the command room, where she had worked along with the other analysts and handlers for years. Until a couple of years ago, her colleagues were the only family she had, and now most of them treated her as a stranger. Some deeply respected Camilla for her career, making move of approaching Lady Ernas during the mission and others envied her and thought that they would be in her place if only Ranger Verhen had been assigned to them. All of them gave her the salute for a few months now and either treated her with deference or spat the moment she turned her back. Camilla had only a handful of friends left, and she was cut off from the office's gossip, so she couldn't make head or tails of their behavior. I'm just a freshly appointed captain with no authority. Everyone knows that Lith is going to leave the army, and that Lady Ernas's position is getting shakier by the day because of Floria's trial. What do they know that I don't? She thought. Camilla walked to her desk, collecting the last of her things. Lith was the only officer she was in charge of as handler, and soon she would become a full-time royal constable. I wonder if distance will put a dent into our relationship. As long as Lith was a ranger, he had to call me every day and, as his handler, I was allowed extra free time to take care of him. Once I become just his girlfriend, however, the army will revoke all our privileges. Maybe I should ask Lady Ernas for. Her train of thought derailed when General Barian called her amulet to summon her to his office. Even from his hologram, Camilla could notice that the general had a shaky voice and was sweating bullets. She knew Barian as a man who wouldn't even flinch in front of his own death, so seeing him upset was ominous at best. Her gut feeling turned into a not the moment when she opened the door to the office, finding that Barian was standing to the sides while Queen Silpha herself was sitting at his desk. Camilla had only met the Queen twice, and both times at galas where they had barely exchanged a few words. She was so stunned that she gave the Queen the salute while performing a curtsy. Close the door, Captain Yevel. Silpha didn't even raise an eyebrow at Camilla's comical performance. As soon as Camilla obeyed, the Queen performed the final hand signs for a powerful set of arrays that sealed the room so that nothing and no one could get in or out the room. Sit down. We have much to discuss. This conversation is related to state affairs, so disclosing its contents to anyone will be considered as an act of treason and punished according to our law. Am I clear? Silpha asked. Yes, Your Highness. Camilla gave her a bow, incapable of standing the Queen's steel gaze. Only you, General Barian, and I are allowed to discuss the matter at hand. Ranger Verhen and even Archon Ernas are not granted clearance to know until the events will be set in motion. There's a huge storm brewing on the horizon, and secrecy is of the utmost importance. Chapter 961 The Enemy Within Part 1. Litha's Mage Tower. At the same time, when Camilla was talking with the queen. After returning from Huriol, Lith attempted to call his handler multiple times, yet Camilla's army amulet was unavailable. He then tried to reach Journey, and when even that failed, Lith tried to contact them on their civilian amulets. This doesn't make sense. I'm certain that they had to work today, and neither of them ever turns off her work amulet. Something must have happened to them. Lith searched his amulet for Orion's rune. The tower warp was pointless if he didn't know where to go. He rarely called Journey's husband, so by the time he found the right communication rune, his army amulet started to blink. What the heck has happened, and why didn't you pick up earlier? You had me worried sick, Lith said to a flabbergasted officer in his mid-20s with brown hair and eyes. I'm afraid there is a misunderstanding. Captain Yeval is currently unavailable, so the system rerouted your calls to me. I'm Lieutenant Brar, and I will be your temporary handler until further notice. The officer said. What happened to Cammy, I mean, Captain Yeval? Lith hated surprises. I'm not at liberty to say, but feel free to start your report as soon as you are ready. Brar said. When will she be back, and why I can't get in touch with Constable Ernest either? Lith looked at the hapless lieutenant in such a way that if glares could maim, Brar remains would easily fit in a lunchbox. The system says I haven't got clearance to know that. Litha's handler rushed to explain. The hologram saved him from the oppressive mana the ranger was exuding, but Brar could see how angry he was, which reminded him of all the things he had heard about Lith. Horrible things. Fine. Lith snarled and told the lieutenant about the group of undead who had triggered the erase alarm that protected Huriol. As soon as Lith mentioned Arthan's name, Brar stopped him. This is way above my clearance level. Let me ask General Barian for authorization before you continue. Lith nodded for him to proceed. Barian still retained his role of commander because they had yet to find a valid replacement. What is it now? King Marone's annoyed hologram appeared, making Brar freeze in panic while Litha's paranoia shifted to top gear. If the system redirected the call, then Barian is unavailable as well. On top of that, for the king to take the call personally, it means that either the general is under investigation for treason or that the king doesn't trust the upper echelons of the army. This doesn't bode well. Though, Lith repeated his story from the beginning, but the king interrupted him when Lith described his meeting with Headmaster Hister Savinus. Lieutenant Brar, the contents of this conversation are state secrets. I've already locked the file, and you are forbidden from disclosing anything about what you heard so far. If I catch a single word about it going around, you'll be charged with high treason. Am I clear? Marone said. Brar nodded, and the king forcibly shut down the lieutenant's amulet. Now you can continue your report, Ranger Verhan. By the time Lith finished talking, the king was pinching his nose in frustration. I never received good news. I'm starting to think this crown is cursed. Marone said. Who else knows about this? Only your majesty and I. Lith replied. I stand corrected. Finally good news. Marone sighed. Just like all your predecessors, you've probably understood for a while that Huriol is an academy. We always believed it was a failed prototype, but according to what Hister said, it actually works as intended. You didn't know? Lith was flabbergasted. Most of Arthan's records are lost either due to time or because he destroyed them once he realized his days were numbered. I'm not going to lie to you. You are not the first one to reach the core of the Golden Griffin Academy, but you are the first to ever live to tell the tale. Repeat everything from the beginning and don't leave out any detail. This time the king made Lith a lot of questions about the light Hister had enveloped him with and about the combat prowess of Huriol's inmates. If the living legacy called them an army, then there must be a way to control them. I'm afraid that light was not only meant to bind you to the academy, but also capable to exert some kind of mind control. Marone said, My orichalcum skinwalker armor protected me, and I'm certain to be all right. Lith didn't like the implications of those words one bit. We need to make sure. You could be an involuntary puppet right now. Jakra is already out there somewhere, and if he ever crosses paths with Thrud, he might be compelled to tell her about the army Artan prepared for her. I expect you to reach the royal capital for a mandatory quarantine. Meanwhile, I'll send someone to further investigate Huriol. This is no longer a matter of containing it, but to be prepared for the worst. We need to know if once outside the prisoners are freed from its influence or still retain their immortality. Thrud is already dangerous as she is. If she were to acquire an undying army formed by hundreds of years-old battle veterans enslaved to her will, the Mad Queen would make the undead invasion look like a walk in the park. King Marone out. Solus. The moment the king's hologram disappeared, Lith performed a full-body scan on himself with Invigoration and Scanner while Solus did the same. Don't worry, you are fine. Between studying your hybrid life force and the cracks in your human essence, I know them as the back of my hand. Solus said. Also, I made sure that the light never touched your body. That's a relief, but it doesn't save me from quarantine. They will never believe to a self-diagnosis, and I can't bring you along. We gotta split up. Lith put everything valuable inside his pocket dimension before reaching the nearest city with a warp gate in record time. He found royal guards looking for him at the city gates, who stripped him of all his enchanted items before tying his fingers and putting a gag to his mouth. Such safety measures were pointless against an awakened, but would render any normal mage helpless. They brought him to Valeron, the capital of the Griffin Kingdom, where Headmaster Marth and Professor Vaster were waiting for him. For the god's sake, Lith, we must stop meeting like this. Vaster said, trying to lighten the mood. Yeah, I can't believe that I'm starting to consider crises as the occasion for your social visits. Headmaster Marth nodded. The two royal healers and their guards brought Lith inside a white padded cell that life vision confirmed to him was covered in arrays that blocked all elements but light. Without Solus, he lacked a good chunk of his usual brain power, so Lith had no idea what was happening and asked for an explanation the moment they removed his restraints. Together with Manohar, the two of us have spent a lot of time studying the tomes and machines you found in the ODI ruins. We did it to assess the threat a second Kula might pose to the kingdom in the case they caught us unprepared. Imagine our surprise when the resident genius pointed out that he had only seen one contraption that exploited both light magic and technology to work. Marth said, Chapter 962 The Enemy Within Part 2. Arthan's Madness. Lith's shock didn't stop him from putting together the pieces of the puzzle. As always, Manohar was right. Vaster had finished his chance and continued in Marth's stead, who had just begun. Arthan's Madness is a modified version of the ODI's body-swapping machine, with the use of modern Tier 5 magic instead of the crap the ODI used. If Ardhan really knew the ODI's workings, then the light that attempted to merge with me might be an improved version of the slave device the ODI carved upon their victim's life force. Lith completed the phrase for him. Exactly. It would explain why he attempted to force you to stay and how Thrud could control her army if she ever puts her hands on the Golden Griffin. We already have an Emerald Dragon at large that is likely to be enslaved. The kingdom can't afford a mage of your caliber with a clearance level as high as yours to be another Wainmeyer. Now shut up and let us work. Marth snarled at the memory of Nailier's betrayal. The two professors worked relentlessly for over 2 hours, checking Lith's life force for any kind of subtle alteration. Lith did the same, but he used Invigoration to boost his life force and Scanner to make sure it hid his hybrid nature. His second energy signature was naturally eclipsed by the human life force, and even if one was talented enough to also perceive life forces as a melody, it was almost impossible to spot unless one knew what to look for. My diagnosis is that Lith's life force is pure and unaltered, Vaster said while dabbing the sweat from his forehead. He was panting as if he had run a marathon. Despite his constant practice, body fat and age limited his stamina. I second your opinion. Marth sighed in relief. He was sweating as well, but unlike his colleague, he didn't need to sit down. I had hoped that time in your growth spurt would have at least partially mended the cracks in your life force, but alas, I was wrong. Do they have any side effects you want to share with us? No, Lith replied while watching at his two teachers with death vision. He had released it to gain the full focus needed to make only one life force visible, and was happy to see that no one in the room was awakened or undead. Yet the fact that dying of old age was an unlikely end for all those present saddened him. Marth and Vaster died in such gruesome ways that Lith was speaking to small mounds of flesh most of the time. The royal guards, instead, died mostly of poison or blade wounds, filling the air with the sweet, metallic smell of blood mixed with chemical substances. I would clear you from all suspicions, but healing magic is different from other kinds of spells. Vaster sat on what was going to be Litha's bed. It can have delayed effects, so the quarantine will last a few days. Also, your cracked life force makes you more susceptible than normal to that kind of spell. Even an incomplete slave enchantment might work on you. We need to make sure you're not a threat to yourself or others. Do you have any questions? Yes. How long will quarantine last, and will I be allowed to have visitors? Lith asked. A few days, maybe a week. Marth said. As for visitors, it can be arranged, but no direct contact will be allowed. You could speak with them through a glass. Why so long? Here, let me show you why. Vaster took a silvery wand out of his pocket that Lith recognized as a royal Forgemaster tool. What the? Is it the Healer Forgemaster combo, such a common specialization? Lith asked. Actually, yes. Marth took out his own and showed it to Lith. The two disciplines have very much in common. Only blockheads like Manohar disregard all branches of magic but their own. Vaster chanted an unknown spell while drawing silver runes with his wand in the air, making Lith wish that Solus was with him to study the wand's pseudo-core and memorize the spell. A silvery fog came out of the wand, highlighting all the magical auras surrounding Litha's body. The fog took the shape of his skinwalker armor, his rings, the dimensional amulet, and even of ruin. Luckily for Lith, due to war's violent nature, he rarely used the blade, so its energy signature was eclipsed by ruins. Also, both Orion's cloaking ring and Solus's weren't revealed by the spell. What it revealed, instead, was a gaseous substance enveloping Litha's body that kept moving back and forth, like a wave crashing against a reef. As you can see, whatever Headmaster Savinus did to you is still there. Vaster said, once your body is cleansed by all lingering energies, and if your life force is still unaltered, then you'll be released. What about visitors? Marth asked. I don't want anyone seeing me like a caged animal. Lith said after pondering for a while. Can I at least talk with them with a communication amulet? I'm sorry, no. Dimensional magic would allow you to escape. Recording devices aren't allowed either. Marth shook his head. We'll try to visit you as often as we can. You're allowed to have contacts with healers capable of fighting you. The two professors walked out of the room to give their report to the king, but before leaving they made sure that Lith was served one of his favorite foods and sealed light magic as well. There was no telling what a talented healer like Lith could do, nor they could risk him being able to create hard light constructs like Manohar. Also, with all the elements blocked by the arrays, the lingering energies surrounding Litha's body would have nothing to feed upon and hopefully dissolve faster. First, Lith tried calling Solus with their mind link, but even their deep bond couldn't overcome the hundreds of kilometers separating them. Then, he tried all kinds of magic, discovering that fusion and spirit magic still worked. I can try to escape if shit hits the fan, but I can't afford to practice while I'm here. There are likely surveillance devices in the cell, so the only thing I can do is train my body with calisthenics and my mana core with accumulation disguised as meditation. He thought. Lith suspected his meal to be drugged, but ate anyway. He was still weakened from the fight in Huriel and also had confidence in his enhanced body. Between light fusion and his mana-infused organs, there were few things he couldn't detoxify. His paranoia proved to be wrong. The food was delicious, and the only threat it posed was the one to his figure. Lith spent the following days training for 16 hours and sleeping for the rest of the time. Vaster and Marth visited him daily, one in the morning and the other in the afternoon, to break his isolation. Journey and Orion were too busy dealing with Velandyrus to visit him often, but they still came as often as they could. Between their clearance level and physical prowess, they were the only ones allowed to enter his room. With Floria's exception, their daughters were deemed too weak, but she was on duty and unable to reach the capital. Litha's family and Camilla even offered to sign a full release, but the professors refused. Neither of them wanted to risk Lith going mad if he harmed someone he loved under the effects of the slave spell. Chapter 963, The Fallen Part 1. After just a couple of days, Litha's body couldn't take the training regimen anymore, not with just 3 meals a day. He couldn't explain to them that thanks to invigoration his body required but a second to regain his vigor, so he accessed Solaspedia to relieve his boredom. Only then did he notice that his mental library was completely empty except for a scroll. It said, "If you can read this, eject the scroll inside the tower." The moment Lith did as instructed, 2 more scrolls appeared inside Solispedia. The first said, "If you are all right, eject this scroll," while the second, "If they are holding you prisoner against your will, eject this scroll." "Solus, you are a damn genius." Lith smiled while ejecting the first scroll and continuing their long-distance conversation. The two of them shared all of Solus's tower abilities. Distance only made it harder for Lith to access his dimensional space, but he still managed to do it just by heightening his focus. Solus told him that after separating from him, she had reached the mana geyser in the Tron Woods to assume her tower form and alerted Tista, Protector, and Faluel. None of them trusted the kingdom, so they had waited to receive news directly from him while preparing for the worst-case scenario. Lith's family had faith in the Urnas and the professors, but since they were both forbidden from telling them the reason for Lith's confinement, everyone was scared to death, even Solus. Together with Lith's awakened allies, she was staging a prison break. After being reassured of his well-being, Solus passed the information to Tista, who in turn relayed it to the rest of the family under the pretense it came from an awakened source. Celia had to wait spring before starting the renovation of her house in Lucia, so she had been living with the Verhins in the guest room to run the house, while Alina was too distressed to do anything. She only brought the little Finra with her, leaving the other children in Naurin's care. After another couple of days, most of the magical energies lingering around Lith's body had disappeared. Huriel's fog was still there, but thinner and farther from his life force than before. Your life force shows no sign of alterations, and the spell's effects are as good as gone. You'll be free soon, Vaster said with a smile. Lith was so happy for the good news that as soon as the professor left, he tried to eject the scroll in Solispedia related to his release when he noticed a new message. "I've lost contact with Tista. A small battalion is surrounding your house, preventing everyone from going in or out. The arrays have been reinforced to the point that even my mirror hall can't see inside. I'm afraid such precautions are related to your condition and to the approaching of the day of your discharge from the army. I suspect the royals are afraid that someone might strike during your absence. I'll keep you posted. Check Solispedia often. What the heck is going on, and why can't I leave my own home?" Tista snarled a few centimeters from the face of the commander of the Queen's Corps squadron that had surrounded the Verhen household. The poor man was torn between his duty and the mad desire to kiss her full lips. Tista Verhen was a 20-years-old gorgeous woman, 1.76, 5 feet 9 inches, meters tall, with waist-length auburn hair that had several shades of red. Tista's oval face and her delicate features only emphasized the perfect proportions of her curvy body. Anger gave her pearly pink skin a tinge of red that made Tista even more alluring. "I'm not at liberty to say." The commander felt deeply embarrassed hearing his usually authoritative voice sound squeaky. None of his men thought any less of him since they needed their sheer willpower just to look away from the goddess in front of them and perform their duty. Their throats felt dry as desert sand at the idea to speak to her. Refusing her request was beyond them. "I'm a mage of the kingdom and demand to know," Tista said, almost making him crumble. "And I'm a great mage and an army major under the direct command of the royals. My answer is still no." He tried to sound stern, but it was as if he had inhaled helium. The commander's voice was so distorted that it sounded ridiculous, yet no one of those present was in the mood for laughing, especially Camilla. She was squirming on her chair, torn between her duty toward the kingdom and the desire to share with the others what she knew for days. Fear and stress had been eating at her from the inside all along, but she couldn't disobey the queen, not with all that was at stake. Celia wasn't faring any better. She had no idea what was happening, but if Fenrir decided to shape-shift in front of so many witnesses, her family would be in a world of trouble. To make matters worse, she was unable to leave as well. She was afraid of leaving her children alone for so long, and what Protector would do if he were to believe the soldiers were taking her hostage. Despite all his patience and wisdom, Ryman was a father and a husband first. The moment someone threatened his family, he wouldn't hesitate to take on the army on his own. "My son is no traitor." Raz jumped from his chair. "If you hope to use me as leverage for your dirty tricks, I'd rather die than force him to a lifetime of servitude." Fear was quickly turning into anger, and Camilla was afraid of what could happen in a room filled with people armed to the teeth. The glass Raz was clenching was actually a death bomb that would destroy the life force of whoever was struck by it. Alina's wooden spoon was capable of controlling all the arrays in the house and turning the home appliances into war machines. Luckily for Camilla, her army amulet started to blink before the situation could escalate further. The hologram of the queen appeared in the middle of the room without Camilla's touching the amulet, proving that she had used the royal override. Enough! Her voice roared like thunder. Neither distance or the ethereal nature of the hologram managed to lessen the imposing presence of the queen. Commander Ulper can't answer your questions because he doesn't know anything. Silpha looked around the room, making sure that everyone had regained their cool. Mage Verhen, I can understand your outrage, but not your childish behavior. A mage incapable of controlling their emotions can't control the elements, and it's nothing but a liability for the kingdom. Only experience and self-control allowed the queen to keep her voice stern and her eyes steady instead of checking Tiste out. Members of the Verhen household and their guests, you knew from the moment Lith Verhen joined the army that his life wouldn't be his own anymore. The kingdom has required many sacrifices for him and is about to ask one more. You can choose to witness the last moments of great Mage Verhen, or you can stay cooped up home. Either way, I will not allow you to endanger my plans to protect the kingdom, even at the cost of arresting you all. At those words, all of those present turned pale as ghosts. Chapter 960 For the Fallen Part 2. Captain Yeval, I charged you with keeping them calm, and you failed me, forcing me to reveal my presence. Camilla was flabbergasted, realizing that the queen had been watching and listening to them the entire time. Suddenly Litha's paranoia sounded reasonable. I relieve you from your duty. Prepare them for what is about to come and embarrass me no further. Everyone turned toward Camilla, looking at her with steel gazes as if there was a traitor among them. Even Zinnia didn't say a word to defend her. I couldn't disobey a direct order from the queen, just as there wasn't anything I could say to ease your worries. Camilla said to both the queen and the Verhens. Silpha's gaze softened, realizing she had tasked the captain with an impossible mission. If it was her son they were talking about, the commander and his men would be all over the place, reduced to small bits. 2 more days passed with no more news from either Solus or the professors. For the first time in his life, Lith hated his secrets. He had asked Marth and Vaster multiple times if everything was all right at Lusha, only to hear them lie to his face. Yet he couldn't expose them without revealing Solus's existence and their bond. He focused solely on accumulation, drawing world energy non-stop in the case he needed to escape. If only I managed to see out of this cell and could tell Solus where I am, she might be able to help me, he thought. Lith understood that something was truly wrong when Vaster, Marth, and Manohar walked through the door of his cell in their Spellbreaker uniform and all wearing a stern expression. Change into this. We'll wait for you outside. Marth handed to him what looked like a light blue jumpsuit that would have looked identical to an Earth's prisoner uniform, if not for bearing the army color. Lith used both invigoration and life vision, discovering that the cloth was enchanted, yet it was nothing he had ever seen before and was already imprinted. At least it's not a slave item, but I can't refuse to wear it anyway. I'm completely disarmed, whereas they are veterans and are combat ready. The professors aren't wearing ceremonial garbs and weapons, but the real deal. I doubt I can take out even one of them. They are prepared and waiting for troubles. Also, I've already seen how good Vaster's and Manohar's teamwork is. If we add Marth, I don't have a ghost of a chance without my equipment and Solus. Lith thought. The professors had him walking in the middle of a triangular formation, with Headmaster Marth on point, while Vaster and Manohar walked behind him. I'm really sorry, kid. You deserved better, Manohar said, his tone sadder than Lith had ever heard him. The god of healing's ominous words deserved him several curses from his colleagues. Paranoia made Lith plan on weaving his best spells, perform a surprise attack on his wardens with 3 Tier 5 spells at the same time, and then flee from the royal castle. Then, his good sense stopped him. Even if I manage to escape from this corridor, I have no idea where the exit is. Let's assume I leave the castle, then what? My family is presumably held hostage, and I've got nowhere to run, he thought. On top of that, this is too weird. Jumpsuit aside, I've not been charged with anything. I wear no restraints, and I can feel that aside from dimensional magic, I can use all elements again. Despite the many inconsistencies, Lith silently cast his spells. Being rational was good, but being rational and prepared was better. After walking through a few stark corridors, he understood that the royals didn't hold him in the dungeon, but in the medical ward of the castle. The space around him went from mental asylum to royal palace of Versailles quickly. Even mirrors were framed with solid gold, while all the tapestries and paintings on the walls were not only masterpieces to the point that even a layman of arts could appreciate them, but they were also enchanted. The carpets were the same, but while the pieces of art on the walls depicted epic scenes of battle and the magical breakthroughs of the past magi that had shaped the kingdom's history, those covering the floor guided the guests by giving them directions. Soon Lith recognized the path towards the banquet hall. It was filled with magical marvels, among which at least 50 different arrays and countless magical treasures hidden inside the walls that only life vision revealed to him. The double doors leading inside were wide open. Before they could enter, a valet checked Marth's ID before announcing their arrival, speaking with a magically enhanced voice. The room was more than 40 meters, 133 feet, long and over 30 meters, 100 feet, wide, with a single red silk carpet with gold embroidered edges going from the 3 meters, 10 feet, wide double doors up to the 2 steps that distanced the floor where nobles stood and the raised one for the royal family. That way, even while sitting on their golden thrones, the royal couple would be able to look down on everyone present, reaffirming their status and authority. The whole room was lighted by crystal chandeliers, fueled by magic, leaving no space for shadows or need for maintenance. On the walls, magically enchanted tapestries would recount over and over the great feats that the current king had accomplished to be deemed worthy of his power. Both the floor and the pillars of the room were realized from gold-veined marble, the most precious and robust material available in the Griffin Kingdom. The room was filled with nobles and mages of all ages and relevance. Some Lith knew personally, like Marchioness Miriam Distar, Count Lark, General Barian, and the Ernest family. Others were merely acquaintances like Velan Dyrus and Baron Arrows Wyland from Jambel, but most of them were complete strangers to him. I wish Solus was with me. She would probably remember who the beanpole is and why he is glaring at me like that. Lith failed to recognize Caulion Nuragor and all the enemies he had made as a student first and a ranger later. The room was filled with those who thought of themselves as his friends and those who considered him a threat. Both were eager to witness Lith's judgment. Lith glanced at the balconies. They were sealed, but it was nothing that his enhanced body and a spell couldn't open. So far I have no clue. I received my family name here, but I also witnessed several trials for high treason taking place in the banquet hall. The fact that no one wears evening clothes, but only high uniforms don't bode well, though. He thought. Queen Silpha and King Marone were the only ones allowed to sit, whereas all of their guests had to stand. Lith could feel how half the room was tense, while the other half sent dirty looks at him. No one seemed happy, which confused him even more. Fuck me sideways. Lith thought when he noticed that the queen was wielding the sword of Seyful, the weapon of Vailron Griffin, the first king. It was used mainly to declare war and execute traitors. Chapter 965, The Arisen Part 1. Lith was already sweating bullets when Orion, who was wearing a silvery royal forgemaster robe, stepped through the crowd and joined the 3 professors. Manohar and Vaster moved to Lith's left side, while Manohar and Orion to his right, in a square formation that left him no way out. The clothes of the lord of the Erna's household and of the 3 professors shape-shifted at the same time. Lith shuddered in fear, recognizing the fabled royal fortress armor. They could be worn only with the authorization of the queen herself, bestowing upon a normal human the power of an emperor beast and upon a mage the strength of a small army. The armor appeared to be made of golden feathers that shone like a sun. The helmet was shaped like an eagle's head, its gloves ended with claws, and a couple of wings made of energy were draped like a mantle around its shoulders. They allowed the wearer to fly, and they could also be used to intercept incoming attacks, be they physical or magical in nature. The suit made those who wore it resemble a humanoid griffin covered in metal. Everyone, but the royal guards, kneel. Silpha and Marone stood up. Her voice was calm and flat as if she had asked to close a window, but the authority in her words couldn't be denied. Literally. The arrays in the room forced everyone to obey at the same time, weighing down like a mountain on all those too slow to comply. Like everyone else, Lith was locked in place, incapable of doing anything but breathing while he stared at his own right foot. Lith of Lusha. Silpha's voice echoed throughout the room like the first clap of thunder announcing the storm. I remember well the first time I heard this name. Back then, you were just a student of the White Griffin Academy, yet your country already needed your help to face the plague that destroyed Candria before it could spread to the rest of the Garland continent. It turned you into Mage Lith, a title only those who graduate from an academy and join the Mage Association can bear. No one cared for your young age and assumed your future was set in stone. Then, you helped to save countless lives against Balkier and Nalier, becoming Mage Lith Verhen. The king and I personally chose your family name and bestowed it upon you, something that usually only the ancient households that are the pillars of the kingdom can claim. A few years later, you joined the army of your own will and destroyed one of the ancient horrors we inherited from our forefathers. It was a feat deemed to be impossible, to the point that even the best of us had given up hope and lived in its shadow and fear. You made us dream a new bright future where you would become a new pillar for the kingdom and help it thrive. It's the reason why you became Great Mage Lith Verhen despite having barely come of age, and many doubted where your loyalty lay. Alas, all good things come to an end. All dreams shatter when daybreak comes. After all the kingdom did for you ever since you joined the academy, we came to learn your intentions to quit the army and walk the lonely path of a beast. Silpha's tone turned from flat and calm to cold and sour. Half the banquet hall started to grin, if not openly smiling from ear to ear. The good thing about kneeling was that no one could see the expression on their faces. You discarded your brothers in arms of the army, turned down Leica Wainmeyer's offer to become a royal forge master, and never deigned to contact the Mage Association except when you needed something. Your actions speak clearly. You treat this kingdom, your country, as if it has failed you, and this can't be tolerated any longer now that your military service is over. From his vantage position, Orion noticed that too many people were clenching their fists in triumph. Lith was alone. The old households considered him a threat to their power because he had quickly risen to high places they considered as their own. The new households considered him a traitor because of his friendship with the Ernest and the Distar households. On top of that, he had never joined their political cause nor helped his peers, which had only exacerbated the new magical bloodline's mood with each success he achieved. To them, Lith had squandered all the opportunities fate had presented him with to change the power scale in the Griffin Kingdom. Orion steeled his heart, not letting any emotion transpire from his face. He silently prayed for Lith, knowing that the worst had yet to come. I, the queen, and my spouse, the king, can't tolerate it any longer because you are right. Silpha said, your achievements as a student helped to prove that Linjos was right, changing the academy system from within and making guilty ballots standard equipment for all students. As a member of the army, you brought down the Black Star, you saved the city of Xantia from being the victim of forbidden arts, you stopped monster outbreaks that threatened thousands, and eradicated corruption or incompetence wherever you went. You faced Thrud Griffin, one of our most ancient enemies, and prevented her nefarious plan from coming to fruition at great personal cost. You discovered 2 ODI ruins, braving both times against ancient horrors that if not stopped might have brought the kingdom to its knees. All those present can bear witness that without you, there would be ODI and Baba Yaga's children hidden among us. Yet what did the kingdom for you in return? We gave you a few days' leave and a few trinkets that even the most unworthy in this room can flaunt. A member of the royal family could ever apologize, yet Silpha's words accompanied by Marone's nodding came really close, making all those present freeze. Recently, the Orichalcum Skinwalker armor you gave Royal Forge Master Orion Ernest allowed us an exceptional breakthrough in the mystical arts and provided our mages with answers we searched for decades. For all of your contributions that are too many to be listed in a single session of this court, however, we can't allow Great Mage Verhen to live anymore. You are aware of too many secrets that can never be disclosed without endangering the lives of us all. For this very reason, today is the day you die. 2/3 of the room sighed in relief, while the rest of them tried to rebel to that injustice while cursing the royal's name, but the arrays kept their limbs still and their mouths closed. Silpha stepped forward, wielding the sword of Seifel with one hand. A mere thought of hers allowed her subjects, loyal or not, to raise their heads and bear witness. Great Mage Lith Verhen is dead. She used the flat side of the blade to pat Lith's left shoulder, then the right, and finally the top of his head. Long live Archmage Lith Verhen. At those words, the blue jumpsuit shape-shifted into a ceremonial royal fortress armor, bearing very few spells of the real deal, among which there was the one allowing royal guards to move freely. Lith remained frozen in place, incapable of making sense of what had just happened. His mind was blank from the emotional roller coaster caused by the Queen's speech. Chapter 966, The Arisen Part 2. Silpha sidestepped, now holding the sword of Seifel with both hands and keeping its tip against the ground while Marone walked in front of the newly appointed Archmage and placed a wreath comprised of the plumes of a golden griffin upon his head. Stand tall, Archmage Verhen. This is the last time I will force you to bend the knee. Unless you become a Magus, of course. Marone chuckled as he patted Lith's shoulders and helped him to get up. The king's silvery laugh made the whole room burst into tears. Some out of joy, most out of despair. Fuck me sideways ×2. What's the average age for an Archmage? Lith thought. For a new magical bloodline with no fief of their own, around 70. Solus replied. Only then did Lith manage to snap out of his reverie and turn around. He noticed his entire family coming from a side room, all wearing their best clothes and the jewels he had forged for them along with the camellias. Alina and Raz had to rely on each other to not fall onto the ground, unable to even stand up properly on their own. Journey and Orion quickly went to their rescue while Lith's sister and Camilla walked towards him. Why the heck didn't you warn me if you knew what was going on? Lith asked. I tried, but even a single door of the royal palace is so heavily enchanted that it blocks our mind link. She said, I would have loved to let your parents witness the ceremony, but during every rehearsal, your father cried so hard that he would drown out my magically enhanced voice. I felt bad forcing them to repress their feelings, so I had your parents spectate from a side room. Queen Silpha said. King Marone patted Lith's shoulder, and the armor turned into a deep blue robe that identified him as an Archmage. Congratulations, Lith. Marth, Vaster, Orion, Miram Distar, and Journey almost said in unison. My condolences, Manohar said, his eyes veiled with sad tears. Now you will never know peace. Men will covet your power and women your loins. Idiots will interrupt your research at all hours and... King Marones glared at the god of healing when Manohar pointed at him while talking about idiots. But it was Journey clicking her tongue that shut him up. The scene was funny enough to momentarily stop the flow of Raz's tears and replace them with chuckles, but no one else was actually laughing. None of those present missed how Lady Distar, the Urnas, and even the magicless Verhen family were able to stand and move, whereas everyone else was still kneeling. The arrays even kept the spectators from uttering a single word, making them feel like extras looking at the main actors on the stage. Velandiris could only look up to those favored by the royals, while Journey winked at her enemies. Not to question the infinite wisdom of your majesty, Lith said. I feel a but incoming. Silpha giggled like a mother listening to a naive child's question. The familiarity and closeness that she was displaying with Lith were a message that only someone as shocked as he could miss. But am I not too young for such a title? Lith was unaware of the political gears that threatened from behind the scenes all he had worked hard to build. He believed that becoming an Archmage when barely past 18 would compromise his position in the kingdom. Of course, he was wrong. The ceremony made him a pillar of his country and had allowed the royals to make all his past achievements public. Between the royals and the support he would receive from the commoners, no one could so much glare at him without an excellent reason. Too old, Manohar sneered. I became an Archmage and a professor at 16. He could have become a Magus at 18 if not for his behavior. King Marone rebuked the mad professor who completely ignored him while patting some random kneeling nobles as if they were pets. He even left a dog treat balanced on the head of those who replied to his kindness by throwing him dirty looks. 20 for me. You beat me by a landslide, Marth said, relieved by Litha's lack of madness. 25 here. Vaster sighed. 25 as well. But I wasn't a professor in the safety of his lab. I worked in the field, protected my wife as a member of the Knight's Guard, and had to raise my children. Orion puffed his chest out with pride. He considered the other 3 men like no-lifers who had dedicated their youth solely to magical research, whereas he had attended his family and grown his lands into a grand duchy. Vasta looked at him with real envy. Back then, he had a wife and kids as well, but his results as a family man were so poor that the professor pretended to be a bachelor like his colleagues. Where are my manners? Silpha chuckled at her own blunder. Stand up and rejoice, my loyal subjects. A snap of her fingers finally released everyone from the array's grip, but it took many people a few more seconds to get up due to the cramps that the prolonged paralysis had caused them. Don't worry, Lith, age doesn't matter, only talent does, Marone said while the others nodded. Your ascension allows the kingdom to finally replace Nailir's accursed name from the plaque of youngest archmage of this generation. Also, there isn't a set order for these kinds of things. Manohar went from assistant professor to archmage without ever becoming a great mage. Lakra Silverwing turned from nobody into a magus at 25 when she shared with the world her discoveries about magic, and Rifa Minadion when she was barely 20. Don't hold back just because people are envious of you. Silpha chimed in, placing her hand on Litha's right shoulder while Marone held his left. No matter what path you'll take in life, no matter where your research will lead you, the Griffin Kingdom will always be your motherland. Your house is here, and we promise to take good care of it in your absence. Litha's brain finally managed to process what was really happening and to see behind the masks of many. Nice move. Dyrus snarled at Journey. My protege is now a great mage, so you made your own into an archmage. How much did it cost you? I'd like to take credit for it, but as you said to me, you're underestimating your opponent. Lith worked so hard, achieved so much, that it only took me a few good words in the right ears to set everything on the right tracks. Journey gave him the soft smile that always accompanied her death blows. She failed to mention how the good words she was talking about were Dyrus's, not her own. Journey had shared the recording of their conversation with the royals, both Orions and her own household, and all the allies the 2 ancient bloodlines and Lith had. Velan Dyrus was unaware of the storm Lady Ernest was brewing with his unwittingly help, something that she planned to use to take her opponent by surprise and drown him before Dyrus even understood what was happening. Aside from turning to a shade of purple, Velan managed to hide his anger. Caline, not so much. Chapter 967 Win Some, Lose Some Part 1. Caline had spent the last year accepting and completing the most difficult missions the Mage Association had to offer. He used the merits achieved to boost his noble title and increase the Nuragor's family political influence. Yet, in the end, all of his efforts amounted to nothing. Just listening to the Queen praising Litha's meritorious acts made him green with envy. He was nowhere near that kind of prowess, and he had always worked with a team. Caline was aware that without Dyrus's support he would have never become a great mage despite being older than Ranger Verhen. The same queen who treated Lith like a son in front of the court had yet to grant Caline a single audience without Archmage Dyrus interceding for him. To make matters worse, both Lith and Caline had received their great mage title in a private ceremony. However, Lith's had received it directly from the king, whereas Caline had been awarded by a nameless bureaucrat of the association. Great Mage Nuragor was now replaying the entire event of Lith's ascension to Archmage in his mind. Caline felt humiliated by his opponent and exploited by his patron, making it impossible for him to attend the ceremony any longer. He stormed out of the room, losing a lot of face and drawing more sneers from his own allies than from his enemies. Even Archmage Dyrus considered such childish behavior unbecoming of a powerful figure. Losing with dignity was more important than winning to achieve the respect of the royal court, or any powerful association for that matter. Sooner or later, everyone would make a mistake. Even Lith had failures in his resume, like Kola's massacre or the destruction of Zalgrish's lab. Just like with magic, what mattered was learning and improving from your own failures. Someone who threw a tantrum and ruined the mood was hardly considered a worthy candidate for a key position in the kingdom. At most, they would send him back to kindergarten. Meanwhile, Lith was finally able to reconnect with his family. Each one of them congratulated him, and Tista shook his hand, slipping solace into his palm. They exchanged their respective memories of the last week, updating Lith on the outside world. Solus had not remained idle. splitting her time between studying Kolua's books in the case Litha's life force needed fixing and forge mastering weapons for the prison break with Protector's help. She would sneak inside Tista's room at night through the window and receive updates from her. After I learned about the ceremony, I stopped producing weapons and remained at Tista's finger to not miss the departure. I wouldn't have missed your ascension for the world. Solus thought. Our ascension, Lith corrected her. None of it would have been possible without you, partner. Solus smiled with joy at those words, yet looked at Litha's sisters and Camilla with an envy so strong that he perceived it. Not only do they look gorgeous in their gala dresses, but they could actually attend the ceremony. How long will I be forced to be just an extra and to live at the fringes of Litha's life? She thought. I'm so proud of you, Archmage Lith. Rena gave him a curtsy, barely holding her chuckles. Don't you dare to give me a big scare like this again. At least you knew it was an award ceremony. I was kept in the dark. Lith said. Rena was stunning in her red dress. No one thought she could actually be the mother of 4 kids. What do you mean, kept in the dark? Everyone studies the Ascension ritual at the academy. Tista said. What did you think the jumpsuit and the honor guards were for? Only those already tempered by at least a couple of meetings with the alias Tyrus used to attend the royal court. Constable Griffin managed to not stare at her like a bunch of sleazebags. Gala dresses were meant to be seductive, but in Tista's case, it was like throwing rocket fuel into a blazing inferno. Never mind. Lith left all rituals and etiquette to either Solus or Soluspedia. Separated from the former, and with the latter still empty, he was as ignorant as a lich about social topics. It's best not to tell them that the Ascension ritual and public executions only differ by the speech given and the ending. Solus thought. Lith approached Camilla, who had remained on the sides while the family reunion happened. On the one hand, she was embarrassed, feeling like she didn't belong to a place filled with so many influential figures. On the other, the rules of etiquette strictly forbid public displays of affection, and she wasn't sure to be capable of holding back. She had been worried sick the whole time that Litha's cracked life force might have been further compromised, or that the royal healers could discover his hybrid nature. Thanks to Journey, she was posted in real time about his conditions and treatments, making her even more anxious than his parents. On top of that, she didn't share that information with anyone to not make the others worry and had carried that burden alone. After being finally reunited with Lith, it took her sheer willpower to not check his body and make sure he truly was all right before kissing him. Camilla wore a silk satin deep blue evening dress to match with Litha's archmage robe. It had a V neckline which left her arms and shoulders exposed, emphasizing her bosom. She also wore a golden circlet which appeared to be made out of small camellias woven together. The gold of the circlet brought out her black hair and vice versa, while both shone under the magical lighting of the room. She wasn't much compared to Tista, Freya, or any of the gorgeous noble dames around them, but she was the only woman in his eyes. Good evening, Captain Yevel. Would you do me the honor of having the first dance with you? Lith gave her a polite bow as if they had just met. Gladly, was all she managed to reply while taking him by the arm. Thank the gods I'm wearing a dress, otherwise everyone would notice how much my knees are still shaking. She thought. The Erna's girls joined them as soon as Lith was done with the family reunion. It would still take a while for the ball to begin. Envious much? Lith said while greeting them with a bow and a smug grin on his face. No really. Quilla punched his arm before giving him a curtsy. During the past days, Mom allowed us to read the reports of all your missions that have become public knowledge after the ceremony. I like my life as it is, peaceful. I already had my share of trouble at the academy and Kulla. If I had to live half of what you experienced just to become a great mage, I'll gladly pass on that. I'd rather build my reputation one magical breakthrough at a time rather than risking my life on a daily basis. Quilla was wearing a silk satin cream-colored ball gown, which left her shoulders and arms exposed, and had a square neck. Her long brown hair was decorated with silver jewelry that complemented the silver streaks it bore due to her talent for light magic. Chapter 968 Win Some, Lose Some Part 2. I agree with Quilla, Freya said. She was wearing a gold-embroidered, emerald-colored evening dress with a V neckline. Her hair was arranged into an elaborate updo, with several tresses knot together that left her neck exposed, emphasizing her leaves-shaped parure composed of golden necklace and earrings with black diamonds that complemented her dark eyes and hair. I'm glad you were the first of our class to become an archmage, but I think the price you paid for it is too steep. No amount of glory is worth facing so many dangers and giving up your personal life. Yet unless the excitement made me blind, I'm the one with a beautiful woman on my arm, whereas you're single. Am I right? Lith said. You'll pay for spreading salt on my wounds. Freya's cheeks flushed in embarrassment, but she kept her smile and composure intact. Many noblemen spilled their drinks at that sight. Between the dress emphasizing Freya's hourglass figure and the blushing highlighting her delicate features, there was not a single bachelor that wouldn't face a dragon to be the one on the receiving end of that smile. I really envy you. Floria sighed. She wore an emerald evening dress and white evening gloves, emphasizing her olive-colored skin due to the prolonged exposure to the sun. It was skin-tight, with a neckline that somehow exerted a push-up effect. She wore part of her hair down, like a silky black waterfall that reached her tights, while the rest formed a tress resembling a wreath over her head. The ball gown was decorated with flower-shaped small jewels, and Litha's golden lily pendant was the only necklace she wore, drawing attention to her slim neck. I'm different from you two, she said to her sisters. I gave up on everything to join the army as soon as I could. I wanted to follow Dad's footsteps if not even to surpass him, yet all I achieved is a big failure. I'm not as good with forge mastering, nor as a mage knight as he was at my age. I have no significant other, and despite I'm 3 years older than Lith, he outranks me on every level. Her face was pale, and her pain ran deep. Yet Floria's smile was sincere, and her voice never wavered. She would keep all of her tears, both those born out of joy and sorrow, for later. She didn't want to end up like Raz, who was still crying so much that Alina couldn't leave him alone and the king had a chair brought to him. Many cruel people would have laughed at a grown man's tears, but Marone was expressing Raz's congratulations and sympathy. Contradicting the king's opinion in public was still considered the closest thing to social suicide. I'm thinking about quitting the army as well. I'm willing to shoulder the responsibilities for my failures, but the thorny path that now blocks me is not of my making. I don't have the strength and patience to fight invisible enemies anymore. Her words shocked and surprised everyone. Floria was the only one among them who had always had her career path as clear as a beacon. Freya's guild was just an experiment. Quilla had yet to decide if the academy was the best place for conducting her research, and Lith was clutching at straws. You can't be serious, my little flower. Orion was back in his high uniform, and without the helm. His face expressed all of his worry and outrage. You are the best mage knight I have ever seen, a natural-born leader, and most of all, it is your heart that matches your talent instead of your ego. You might not have defeated as many monsters as Lith did, but you care about our homeland more than anyone else. Your place is with the army, or at least with the association. Thanks, Dad, but we shouldn't spoil Litha's night by talking about my career. We can discuss this later at home. Right now, I'm not complaining. I'm just telling my friends that probably I'll have much more free time in the future and that I would like to use it to catch up with them. You have no idea how much I missed you all. Do you think I could join your guild for a while, Freya? Whatever I decide to do, I want to keep myself busy, Floria said. Orion and Journey felt their hearts as if squeezed in a vice, yet they both returned to attend to their allies. Floria's parents knew that her making plans for the future meant that she had one foot out of the army's door already. The king and the queen felt the blow as well, but they kept smiling and laughing. To revel and be merry of their success was the only way they had to hide the magnitude of their failure. If political pressure was enough to make even the daughter of the Urnas quit, a loyal officer who belonged to one of the founding families of the kingdom, then the foundations of the country itself were rotten at best. A few days later, village of Lusha. After what he had lived as a near-death experience and hearing about Floria's situation, Lith needed to spend quality time with his beloved to recover from all the accumulated stress. Before being discharged, the army had promoted him to major and put him among the reservists to be called only in the case of a state crisis. It allowed Lith to hold his rank in the army even as a civilian and the access to military resources that such clearance level implied. There was still a bit of time before he started his apprenticeship with Faluel, and Lith didn't want to spend it alone. During the day, he would teach Lyria and Aaron how to read and write. Once the kids' limited attention span was exhausted, he would make them play together with Celia's and Zinya's children. Protector was busy renovating the Huntress old house to accommodate their family once they moved back to Lucia. Celia and Rena could use a hand since their newborns required from them a lot of attention, making Litha's skill as a healer a godsend. He was weary of the situation because Lilia and Lyria had a hard time controlling their shape-shifting abilities, and because now that he was not a member of any organization, it was the perfect moment for his enemies to attack. The title of Archmage worked only as long as he could blame someone. It was useless against nameless assassins that left no evidence behind. Yet the kids could run and play freely in all the space encompassing the Verhen, Fastero, and Yevel households. It wasn't because of the arrays or the Queen's Core. The former had limited range, and the latter had too many people to defend to cover such a wide area. The reason for such freedom lay in the magical beasts who soared the skies, patrolled the ground, and burrowed the underground. That and the 3 emperor beasts known as the Kings of the Tron Woods, always keeping an eye on the children. They were all Litha's loyal followers, eager to repay his gifts of knowledge and enchanted weapons. At first, Zinnia had been scared by the presence of so many mighty creatures, but after speaking with them and recovering from the shock caused by the discovery that beasts could talk, she learned to rely on their presence. Chapter 969 Time to Move Part 1. Why the other cats just meow while you can talk? Aaron asked Reaper the Manticore, the king in the south. For the 100th time, I'm not a cat. Reaper tried to appear scary, but the 4-year-old kid failed to notice his deadly fangs, only focusing on the soft mane on the Manticore's lion head, the big round eyes of the feline, and the long whiskers on its snout. You're so fluffy. Lyria hugged the Emperor Beast's side, destroying the last remnants of his dignity while she climbed on his back and played with his feathered wings. Kids are amazing. Floria was laughing her ass off at the sight of Reaper's miserable expression while the children tried to interest him in their games and toys. My soldiers would wet their pants being surrounded by magical beasts like that, whereas she pointed at the kids now divided in 2 teams of 3 each for their next game. Half of them were riding SHYFS, Puma-type magical beasts, and the other Riss, wolf-type. The 2 teams would chase a leather ball in an odd mix of soccer, polo, and wrestling. The rules were unclear, and so were the victory conditions that changed according to the day, weather, and wind direction. The kids enjoyed every second of their games, and once a match ended, mostly due to the physical exhaustion of the riders, Lith would bring them back home. Their respective mothers were ecstatic about having their children too tired to misbehave or to try and avoid their homework. Also, the threat of being grounded and miss the next game was a great motivator. Floria had decided to take a sabbatical and was using that time to reconnect with Lith and his family. The undead crisis was far from being resolved, but, for all she cared, the army might as well fire her. Floria didn't feel she had to prove herself to anyone anymore. She'd rather stop to smell the roses and plan her future than keep risking her life to pursue a dead-end job. Once he was done with the kids, Lith would spend his afternoon at Solus's tower, studying the 2 new floors and practicing forge mastering. She had gained a 2nd floor both above and below the ground, yet he had little use for them, so they focused more on the latter. With her now deep cyan mana core, Solus could hold her human form longer and use that time to forge master together with Lith. They shared the same energy signature and had a hammer each, so in theory by joining their hands they could double the strength of their creations. In practice, however, they had 2 completely different ways of forge mastering, and they had to learn how to adapt to each other. On top of that, Solus had to keep the magic circle, empower both hammers, and forge master, whereas Lith was the only one capable of shaping powerful pseudo-cores. It took them several attempts just to craft an upgraded version of the Skinwalker armor because they were so in sync that they would try and fix together the same imperfection that arose in the pseudo-core while it merged with the orichalcum. The double hit would turn bumps into dents and vice versa, wasting a lot of their energy and making them quarrel. In the end, they decided to split the tasks and put an end to that mess. With his superior magical force, Lith would focus solely on harmonizing the pseudo-core with the armor, while Solus with her finesse would take care of the imperfections. Once Camilla returned from work, Lith would spend the evening with her either on a family dinner or take her out on dates. Only after not receiving any news from Faluel for over a week did he go to check on the Hydra. Is everything all right? He asked once they were done with the niceties. Yes, sorry if I made you worry, but I'm in a bit of a pinch. The climate is still quite rigid and Zedros just took my son, Cedra, as his apprentice. Faluel said. This doesn't bode well. Lith said. Indeed. I don't like cold, and that idiot failed to notice that he's basically a hostage. Faluel sighed. Lith told her all about his last meeting with the Wyvern and the things Zedros had asked him for. Why did you never tell me about Omni Pockets and about Naurin's origin? The fringes might hold the knowledge I need to fix my life force, protectors, and maybe even a way to restore Solus's memories and power. Lith asked, while Solus was sitting on his shoulder. Together with the deep cyan core, not only did she obtain new floors for the tower, but also new mass for her stone form. Solus had now a scaled-down humanoid appearance that resembled a 0.6 meters, 2-inch, tall stone doll. She was completely featureless except for 2 deep cyan mana crystals where her eyes were supposed to be, 2 deep green gemstones on the back of both her hands, and waist-long stone hair. For the same reason, I never asked Protector why he lied to me about you, or I never asked you how you managed to forge master such a powerful skinwalker armor, nor about Solus's powers as living legacy. Because I respect people's privacy and their decisions. I never forced anyone to open up with me, nor did I expose their secrets unless there's a really good reason. I think that Naurin should tell you the truth only when he feels ready to do it, and not because you force him to. Give him time, and the relationship between you three will be better for it. Faluel assumed her human form, shaking her rainbow-colored hair in frustration. She didn't like either being overbearing while scolding one of her apprentices or Lith's selfish attitude. As for Omni Pockets, I don't have one, so I don't know how they work. Zedros knows about them because he is a dimensional mage, and yet even he has no idea how to craft an Omni Pocket. I never told you about them because I didn't even know you had one. Lith, we have yet to begin your apprenticeship, and I'm already warning you for the first time. Don't become like Zedros, or I'll cut ties with you. Don't let your thirst for knowledge turn into a greed so powerful that it clouds your judgment. Zedros is willing to sacrifice everything to achieve his objectives, and is so lost in his obsession that he believes that everyone thinks like him. Don't mistake kindness for deception, nor respect for a hidden agenda. When you have doubts, just ask and I'll answer to the best of my abilities as long as it doesn't compromise someone else's privacy. I respect you, but I still don't trust you. Minus points for doubting me, but bonus points for stepping forward instead of attempting to manipulate me. Total is 0. Anything else? She asked. Actually, yes. Lith told Faluel about Floria's imminent self-awakening and how much she, Quilla, and Freya mattered to him. I should be able to make Floria survive her awakening, and since she already knows everything about me except for minor details, bringing her up to speed should be easy. The problem is that she needs a teacher to survive as an awakened, and I was wondering if you could take her in as well. Chapter 970 Time to Move Part 2. Maybe you could even teach advanced light magic to Quilla. Her healing abilities with fake magic are almost on par with invigoration, and I'm afraid that soon she'll hit a wall. Lith scratched his head in embarrassment. He hated asking for favors, but he lacked the time and the necessary knowledge to help anyone to step up their game. Tista and the kings of the Tron Woods were far from the skill bottleneck Lith and Quilla were facing. They only needed a few lessons and Lith's notes about true magic to keep improving themselves by leaps and bounds. Faluel has 7 heads, so she should be able to freely teach to 7 people. Worst case scenario, there's me, Tista, Protector, Solus, Floria, and Quilla. Faluel would even have a head to spare for her own work. Lith thought. He didn't include Freya not because she was the only one in the dark about his secrets, but because as long as she had her adventurer guild, Freya could never afford to take the necessary time off to take lessons from the Hydras. Both Faluel and Solus looked at him with eyes wide open, as if they saw him for the first time. Are you really willing to introduce them to me? Solus asked with eyes brimming with joy. Are you really willing to put your life at stake again for the sake of others? Faluel said almost at the same time. You've already bound your fate to the 3 kings and your sister. Every person you awaken is your responsibility for the next century. Humans are not like beasts. We age like wine, whereas they age like milk, becoming spoiled and sour. Yes to both of you. Lith nodded. Solus, You know that I never planned to keep you hidden forever, nor I'm ashamed of our bond. If you weren't a girl, and a pretty one at that, I would have already brought Camilla to the tower to meet you." His words would have made Solus blush if stone had blood. As for Floria, she saved me many times, both from my enemies and from myself. I'm not willing to lose her forever. She's worth every risk. I'm proud of you. Faluel stood on her tiptoes to pinch his cheeks. A gazillion points for that. I'll think about this, Floria, but for the other human girl, the answer is no. Quilla's mana core is too powerful for awakening. She'd surely die. I never meant to awaken, Lith tried to say, but Faluel cut him short. On top of that, she's a fake mage, hence competition. You can't possibly know about it because until now you've been a lone wolf, but awakened and fake mages are at odds for decades. The magical progress of fake mages is outstanding. With their numbers and teamwork, they are slowly closing the gap between us and them. People like Tyrus, Salark, or the Magic Empress, who, after defeating and awakened, share with their subjects their spoils of war, don't help our cause. Just like you sharing your skinwalker armor with that Orion, for that matter. I thought he would get nothing out of it, and that he would end up destroying the armor. Lith said, "Yeah, you're not the first to make that mistake, and definitely you won't be the last. Did you get paid for it at least?" Faluel asked. Lith took war out of his pocket dimension, having cared to not take it out of the scabbard. By the Great Mother. Faluel jumped back at the sight of the bastard sword. She never attempted to even come closer, using life vision and her forge mastering spells from a distance. You made an excellent bargain. That's a masterpiece like I've rarely seen from a fake mage. Take it out in the presence of my godchildren, and I'll kill you. None of her words sounded like a joke. You know what's wrong with it? Lith was flabbergasted. Magical metals are different from those a smith normally uses. They almost have a core of their own, which almost gives them life. Faluel nodded. Have you ever heard the saying about artisans putting their soul in their creations? That's true, especially for forge masters. The longer one of us works on a mystic metal, the more it takes from us. It's our energy that composes their pseudo-cores, so you might compare them to a necromancer's work. Just like there are lesser and greater undead, there are lesser and greater artifacts. Your sword is one of the latter. Is it alive? Lith could feel war humming with power, as if it was trying to communicate with him. No, the comparison between the two arts doesn't go that far. Without a brain or life force, there can't be life, but there can be will. Whenever you craft something, you only strive for perfection because you can't allow any distraction. Exceptional forge masters, however, sometimes manage to imbue their willpower into the pseudo-core, just like any good mage does with Tier 5 spells. The difference is that spells are fleeting whereas artifacts are forever, Faluel said. Meaning? It means that this sword carries 2 wills, or in your case, maybe even 3 if Solus can handle it. Whenever it strikes or it employs its skills, the lingering willpower of its maker will fight alongside you. War will both teach you and learn from you. Faluel remained silent for a while, giving Lith the time to understand how complex war's existence actually was. Now go. I'll call you as soon as I'm done with my preparations. I'll teach you and Solus the same things, but I will not teach them the same way. Winter left me swamped, and I'm afraid that soon the Human Council will make its move, so be prepared. Keller region, city of Jambel, a couple of days later. As an archmage, Lith had received countless invitations from feudal lords from all over the Griffin Kingdom. He had politely but firmly turned them down because he had no desire to be involved in any kind of politics. Lith only accepted that of Baron Arrows Wyland because the Baron was one of the few nobles he had met as a ranger that he respected, and he had used the opportunity to bring his family along. Jambel was the only city where he had been treated with respect from the moment of his arrival, and its inhabitants had aided him at the best of their abilities, not afraid to risk their lives. Also, the Baron wasn't a politician but an honest man, and Zalgrish the Lich's silver mines were ripe for the taking. With spring making the climate pleasantly chill, and his family wanting to see the places where Lith had lived during the past 2 years, he could take many birds with one stone. Jambel was a medium-sized fortress city, entirely built of stone. It was too far from the commercial routes to depend on merchants, so it was designed to be self-sufficient all year round. Jambel was built near 2 big lakes, which provided fish and fresh water, while cultivated fields surrounded the city walls up to the nearby woods. They were the main source of game and wood, so the inhabitants of Jambel treated them with great respect. They planted 2 trees for each one they cut down and used turnover to give them time to grow. Unlike most cities, Jambel had no slums. Even the poorest houses were made of stone, and the only wooden buildings were tool sheds. Chapter 971, The Baron's Hospitality Part 1. Jambel's walls were 5 meters, 16, high and wide enough that 2 armed people could easily walk side by side. They were made of gray stone and smooth so that during the day they would partially reflect the sunlight and blind the aggressors. With its nigh zero crime rate thanks to the Baron's welfare system, its great scenery, and its rough but friendly inhabitants, Jambel was the perfect place for Lith to show his family the best the North had to offer and pocket a few silver mines. If the precious metals veins were accessible and Zalgrish had given up on them, of course. Archmage Verhen. It was already hard to believe a runt like you could be a great mage, but now you're an archmage, and you've even accepted my invitation. Well, I've seen it all now. Baron Arrows Wylan laughed while hugging and patting Litha's back as if they were long-lost cousins. He was a man in his late 30s, about 1.78 meters, 5 feet 10 inches, tall, with red hair and a finely trimmed beard. Arrows also had blue eyes as clear as the twin lakes in front of the city and was wearing ceremonial armor, which emphasized his lean but muscular build. The Baron looked and acted more like a soldier receiving a friend rather than a noble welcoming an archmage. His wife, Mirias, watched at the scene with her green eyes wide open in a mix of horror and embarrassment. She was used to her husband being more respectful of his enemies on the battlefield than of etiquette during social events. But such a behavior was beyond her wildest nightmares. Even without lands, an archmage's authority was on par with a duke. Lith could have requested a grand duchy from the royals and be allowed to keep it after a trial period, if he demonstrated enough administrative abilities to make it thrive. Seeing Arrows treating the potential ruler of the entire Keller region like another of his army buddies made her face become even paler than usual and wish Lith had enough mercy in his heart to grant them a painless death. Off the record, when the queen spoke as if she was about to behead you, if it wasn't for that spooky array, I would have jumped at that hag's neck. You don't kill a good man for some petty secrets. I'd rather commit treason than bear witness to such crap, the Baron said. Which is exactly what you're doing now. Public slander of the queen, threatening her life, declaring indifference for the law. The Baroness couldn't bear it anymore and fainted. Don't worry about my missus, Mirias does that all the time. She suffers from low blood pressure and has a weak heart, so she doesn't handle well public speeches. Baron Wylan reassured his guests while the city guards caught the Baroness before she hit the ground. What he had just described was actually a fatal condition. So Tista rushed by her side and performed a full checkup. Normal diagnostic spells came out negative while invigoration revealed a high level of nervous stress. Lith had a hard time not laughing his ass off at the scene. He knew the real reason behind the Baroness' sickness, but said nothing to not make things worse for his host. The Baron was one of those who had actually tried to rebel when Queen Silpha was allegedly seconds away from killing Lith. It was one of the reasons why Lith had chosen Jambel as his destination. When she regained her senses, the Baroness couldn't believe her own eyes. Not only was her beloved city still intact, but the Archmage was amiably talking with her mindless husband, and a real mage was taking care of her. I'm really sorry for the inconvenience, Lady Verhen. I just made a fool out of myself in front of your husband. Mirias had not attended the ceremony of ascension to avoid the humiliation that her husband's antics usually brought upon her. Seeing the most beautiful woman of the group wearing the deep red robe of mages, Mirias had assumed that Tista was Litha's love interest. Good gods, it's no wonder Verhen didn't give my daughter a second glance. Iriel is pretty, but this woman is a goddess. She thought. It's no inconvenience, dear Baroness. Helping the sick is the job of a healer. As for Lith, he is actually my brother. Tista regretted those words the moment they came out of her mouth. The perfect acoustic of the courtyard spread her voice like it was a clap of thunder, making many men feel free to ogle at her, and a couple of guards falls from the city walls because their eyes stared at her figure instead of looking where they stepped. Baron, Baroness, allow me to introduce to you my family and friends. Lith waited for Mirias to get back on her feet before beginning with formal introductions. Together with the Verhen family, there were also Camilla and Naurand. Camilla had received a leave so that she could attend the only official visit Lith had decided to perform, and Naurand had been brought along under the pretense of helping Rena with her triplets. Lith actually needed the Razor's ability to swim through the earth to check how deep the silver veins were, and if there was any trace of Zalgrish's return. Naurand had been promised a share of the profits, and he desperately needed a source of income. Now that Celia was about to move back to Lucia, he didn't want to be a freeloader and rely on her money for everything. Naurand was still scared of people, so he considered the trip to the north as the perfect opportunity to mingle with humans. No matter how many social blunders I might make, I'll never see one of these people ever again. What happens in Jambel will stay in Jambel, he thought. And this is Camilla Yeval, my girlfriend, Lith said after introducing the rest of the family. Girlfriend? Not betrothed. The Baron raised an eyebrow, and the Baroness rolled her eyes. Just girlfriend. Camilla blushed in embarrassment from the rude question, thinking that the nobleman had judged her and found her wanting. A beautiful woman like you, and a soldier at that? Arrows needed but a glance to recognize someone who had received military training. You must work harder, dear Camilla. Love is a battlefield, and she who strikes first strikes twice. Especially in. The Baroness fainted again, requiring immediate assistance. The kitchen. The quickest way to a man's heart is through the stomach. Thank you. I'll remember your words. Camilla gave him a small bow. She also remembered how much Lith liked her cooking almost as much as she liked his. Last, but not least, this is Naurand Fastarrow. He is my boyfriend. Tista cut Lith short and took the Razor's arm. The small crowd of men and women bearing flowers and small pieces of jewelry that had surrounded the Verhens after Tista's blunder moaned in unison. Since when? Naurand blurted out in surprise, making everyone laugh at the alleged joke. You're so funny, dear. Tista giggled while nudging him with enough strength to hurt his ribs. The Baron then introduced to the Verhens his wife Mirias and his children, Kotu and Iriel. The Baroness was a woman in her mid-30s, with blonde hair and green eyes. She was a good head shorter than her husband, and Lith would have considered her pretty, if not for the milky white skin typical of the north, that gave her a sickly look in his eyes. The siblings were twins, both with the red hair of their father and the green eyes of their mother. Seeing them reminded the Verhens about Orpel, Rena's disowned twin brother, and made their cheery mood turn sour. Chapter 972, The Baron's Hospitality Part 2. The Baron had no idea why everyone suddenly looked so sad, so he attempted to cheer them up. Now that we're done with the formalities, I hope you're hungry because I made the cooks. Chefs, Mirias whined, correcting her husband. Prepare us a gruel. A breakfast. Good gods, admit it. You're doing it on purpose, the Baroness said, incapable of enduring that torture any longer. Worthy of the royals, but with larger servings. Unlike them, we all have a real job and don't spend our days sitting on our asses and spewing orders. We need meat on our bones, right, dear? I want a divorce. That was all she managed to say before the Baron took her into his arms and gave her a passionate kiss. Gods, my wife is a real dragon. The angrier she gets, the hotter she becomes. She is still as gorgeous as the day I fell in love with her, he said, making every one of those present blush. Please, follow me. The Baroness didn't have the strength to fight anymore and was resigned to bear whatever calamity her idiotic, yet beloved husband would make befall their household. We've prepared stagecoaches that will lead us to our mansion. Jambel is no other nor Dirios, but reaching its uptown from the city gates, it's still quite a trip, especially for someone with small children. Thanks for your concern, Baroness, but it won't be necessary. I have fond memories of your house, and no one in my family likes moving by horse. Lith's two statements seemed unrelated until he performed a short chant that opened a warp steps leading directly in front of their destination. The citizens of Jambel gasped in amazement. Many of them had only heard about the existence of dimensional magic and considered it almost a myth. Do you mind if I go first? Baroness Mirias asked, clenching her husband's hand so hard due to her fear of the unknown magic that she made him bleed with her long, manicured nails. The Baron didn't even flinch, he just caressed her hand with his thumb to reassure her. Not at all. Lith made her way, and Mirias stepped through the dimensional door with the same relaxed attitude of a gladiator sent to their death. Yet one step was all it took her to reach her house safe and sound. The Baron's mansion was a two-story manor, something normally one would expect to be a house fit for a merchant, not a city lord. Each floor was barely as big as the Urna's ballroom. Only brickwork and a small garden separated the mansion from the surrounding houses, and there was none more luxurious. Mirias's fear was replaced by awe. She had been afraid of experiencing discomfort, of the steps leaving her stranded in the middle of the blood desert, or of some monster coming out of it. Still unable to believe it could be that simple, the Baroness knocked at her own door. The front door opened, and the loyal family butler, Jarns, welcomed her home. The hallway was about 20 square meters, 215 square feet, with walls and floor covered by white painted wood. There was a cabinet for the clothes and a small fireplace above which was a series of hangers to dry coats drenched by snow. A soft carpet led to the other rooms, covering most of the floor and keeping the house warm. After making sure it was really her own home and not some kind of complex prank, Mirias stepped through the warped steps again, returning to their guests. "This is amazing. How do you do it?" Excitement gave her pale visage a shade of red that made her look cute and youthful. She touched her husband through the steps and then walked around it, appreciating the two different sceneries. Even though the dimensional door simply led to another part of her city, to her, it was like a window leading to a different world. Mana and practice. Everything else is a state secret. I'm sorry. Lith replied with a smile. Dimensional magic was only taught by the 6 great academies, and usually only half of their graduates managed to learn it. Kodu, Iriel, you have to try it. Looking at her children's flabbergasted faces, Mirias realized how childish her behavior was and regained her stern countenance. I apologize for wasting everyone's time. You're probably hungry, and I'm making myself a fool out of myself with my antics. She gave them a deep bow, clenching her dress in embarrassment. There's no reason to apologize. We all did the same thing the first time Lith opened one for us. Alina patted Mirias's shoulder to set her mind at ease. Lith patiently waited for everyone to step through the gate, even letting some of the bystanders and guards use it a couple of times before closing the dimensional door. The butler, who was still waiting in front of the open door, took the Baron's mantle while the noble sat on one of the chairs near the door to take off his snowy boots and replace them with clean ones, showing to his guests where the clean house shoes were. Lith and his family just shape-shifted their clothes into a lighter day attire. The process also turned their boots into shoes and cleaned them, leaving all the dirt outside of the door. Even the Baron flinched in surprise this time, staring at his guests with the same curiosity with which they looked at his house. The furniture of every room was made of high-quality materials, but its design wasn't ostentatious. The Baron's house wasn't great, but it definitely was a home. It was warm and cozy. Each one of its rooms was lived in, not just designed for impressing guests with expensive ornaments. "Do you mind if I take notes?" Lith asked while taking ink and paper out of his pocket dimension. "If I ever build another house just for myself, I want it to look exactly like this." Without even thinking about it, Lith looked at Camilla for approval. "I love it," she replied a bit too fast, and with a bit too much enthusiasm for her own liking. "Get a grip, Captain Yevel. We've been together for almost 2 years. You can't get excited like a schoolgirl on her first date over a trivial question. Just because Lith seems to be including me in his plans for the future, it doesn't mean he is going to propose." At that thought, Camilla's brain went out of control. She started rambling nonsense and became so red that Alina had her sit down, afraid that Camilla was feeling unwell. "It would be my honor." The Baron and the Baroness put a hand above their hearts, giving both Lith and Camilla a bow. The dining room was comprised of a long rectangular hardwood table surrounded by several comfortable padded chairs. The table had already been set. The linen tablecloth was pristine white with gold embroideries depicting the Baron's exploits. The cutlery and the plates were all made of silver that reflected the light coming from the magical stones in the crystal chandeliers hung to the ceiling. The house staff was lined up against the wall behind the table, ready to serve the moment their masters sat down. Baron Wylan had prepared for the Verhens all kinds of food, making the breakfast almost a full-course meal for both variety and abundance of the servings. Chapter 9, 73 Gifts and Gratitude Part 1. While the Baron's family was eating together with their guests, Eros used the holographic properties of the enchanted table to show the Verhens all the places of interest both inside and outside Jambel. Being a city in the middle of nowhere, the Baron's fief was lacking in art pieces but was rich in natural wonders and breathtaking landscapes. After the meal, Eros showed the Verhens the place where they would spend their stay. The house next to the Baron's mansion was almost as big and even better furnished. It was also at their complete disposal, since it was always empty in the case Jambel received important guests. There's plenty of bedrooms on both floors, so you can accommodate yourselves like it makes you feel at home the most. The king himself slept in this very room twice. Eros casually said to Lith while showing him around the house. Lith took the hint and the room for himself to not offend his host. Have fun out there. I'll stay here and take care of the triplets. Naurand had already had enough emotions for one day. He wasn't used to being served nor being around so many strangers. On top of that, Jambel closely reminded him of his village, reopening wounds that had never fully healed. No way. I'm not taking a single step without a proper creep ward. Mom has Dad, Rena has Sinton, and Lith has Camilla to keep unwanted suitors at bay. No offense, Cammy. Tista said. Quite a bit taken. Camilla was aware that between a captain and an archmage there was no competition. Yet the idea of being the only woman in the room to be less desirable than her respective partner pissed her off to no end. I need a proper shield, or I'll be the goddamn third the whole vacation. I'm flattered by how highly you regard me. Naurand sneered. Like any normal man, after a bit of time and a lot of awkward moments, he had gotten used to her presence and was now able to treat her like a person. We could take turns so that the kids are never left alone and we can all have fun, Sinton proposed. Unlike Camilla, he didn't mind Tista's remarks. His beautiful children and Rena's mean right hook whenever someone bothered her made him feel confident about the solidity of their relationship. I have a better solution. Lith created the hologram of a stroller and then split it into its components for Naurand to study it. Interesting design, but why use wheels? That way a single bump in the road would wake up the baby. The Razar waved his hands, creating hard-like constructs capable of floating on their own. Because I devised it for non-mages. Lith lied through his teeth. Keeping a floating spell active for long is exhausting. Rena looked at both men with awe. She loved her children, and the fact that they were growing by the week filled her with joy, yet it also made them heavier. Between breastfeeding and carrying the children around all day, the muscles in her arms were as toned as those of an athlete. Naurand, hybrid or not, you'll make a wonderful husband. Celia is right when she says that the woman who gets you will count her blessings on a daily basis. Lil bro, I can't believe you're thinking about having children to the point of inventing things for Camilla. Rena, Alina, and Tista had their eyes veiled with tears. I didn't invent it, I just plagiarized it. The non-mage thing was just an excuse. Lith thought while realizing his blunder. It was hard to tell who was the more flustered among them, if Lith, Naurand, or Camilla. The Razar made sure that the construct looked like it was made of wood so that Lith could make it pass for one of his forge mastering crafts and keep light mastery a secret. The strollers were a huge hit while the Baron toured the Verhens around Jambel, reinforcing Lith's reputation of being a polymath genius. How much does one cost? Many parents burdened by small or lazy children asked them many times. Yeah, how much? Raz asked Lith with pleading eyes. With their short legs, Aaron and Lyria would get tired quickly. A 4-year child was too small to endure long walks and too big to be easily carried around, especially those who, thanks to Lith's treatments, were tall for their age. Raz and Sinton were puffing while they carried their respective child on their shoulders. They were both cursing themselves for not asking Naurand for more strollers earlier. He couldn't make them pop out of thin air without revealing his secret. I don't want a stroller. I want Onyx. If you let her come, this wouldn't happen. Aaron whined in childish outrage, referring to the SHYF he considered to be his loyal steed. And I want Abominus. He must be bored to death without me. Lyria said, making her mother worry about her naming sense. Son, how many times do I have to tell you? Magical beasts aren't toys. She would need a place to stay and food to eat. Lots of food, Raz said, trying to make Aaron see reason. She's not a toy, she's my friend. Onyx could sleep in my room, and I could share my food with her. I don't eat much. Yet his stomach was already gurgling. Baron Wyland had brought his guest to the market district, and the street was filled with tempting smells coming from the local bakers. Luckily for the grown-ups, buying sweets for the kids was an excellent way to have a few minutes of respite. They spent the morning visiting Jamble's downtown and shopping around. Gods, this is the part of any trip I hate the most, Camilla thought. Even after getting promoted to captain, and despite a few hefty bonuses for the cases solved, she was still neck-deep in debts. A year had passed since she had paid for the body sculpting procedure that had given sight to her sister, Zinnia. Even with all the discounts that Lith had granted her as head healer, of the 3 gold coins and 50 silvers, she had repaid less than a single gold coin. Even military officers like Journey were paid in silver, and it took 100 silver coins to make a single gold one. Even if now Zinnia had no financial trouble thanks to the compensation money she had received from her late husband's family for the years of abuse Falmug had put her through, she had no source of income and 2 children to raise. Taking such a sum from the trust fund Vastor's accountant had created for her would have crippled Zinnia's annuities, so Camilla had to tread carefully with her expenses, whereas the Verhens could buy whatever caught their eye. Take whatever you want. It's on the house, a middle-aged merchant said, while giving Lith a deep bow. Having an archmage shop in his humble store was more than he had ever imagined. We can't do that. Your business would take a huge blow. Having married a blacksmith, Rena was well aware of the hardships retail traders had. Please allow us to pay. Nonsense. Archmage Verhen fought long and hard for this city during the last 2 years. He saved more than my business. He saved my home and my family. How could I turn down the first opportunity one got to express my gratitude? The merchant said. Chapter 974 Gifts and Gratitude Part 2. Not only the man was adamant about giving the Verhens gifts, but also Rena's words seemed to have hurt his pride, so she gave up. Camilla felt guilty at the idea of exploiting such a good man's heart, so she only picked one piece of clothing. It was a close-fitting, deep red woolen sweater so soft and warm that it felt like wearing a hug. The rest of the family followed her lead and did the same. Her regret about not being able to take more was soon replaced by relief when all the shopkeepers did the same, always refusing to let them leave empty-handed. By the time they were back to the Baron's guest house, her dimensional amulet was full, and Camilla had to borrow some space from Litha's pocket dimension. Unlike the Verhens, the only storage item she had was the one Lith had gifted her for her birthday, which was always half full with her working equipment. Good gods! If Jambel had more stores, I would need a new apartment just to have a wardrobe big enough for all this stuff. While looking at the handbags, clothes, and shoes lined up on her bed, Camilla's voice and eyes brimmed with joy, in stark contrast with her words. She had even managed to pick lots of souvenirs for Zinnia and her children. If you are happy, then I'm happy as well. Lith looked at his archmage robe as if it had betrayed him. He had received a non-imprinted robe after the ceremony of ascension and stored it inside the skinwalker armor. Until that moment, all of his uniforms had kept people at bay, whereas the deep blue robe acted as a magnet. Lith didn't like receiving so much attention, nor had any interest in most of the things he had nearly been forced to take, to the point that he had mostly picked stuff that others wanted to give them as gifts. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Camilla ignored his flat tone and embraced him with so much enthusiasm that it almost resembled a tackle. Is there anything I can do to return you the favor? She buried her face in his chest, emitting a low purring sound of pleasure. Maybe. You're a royal constable, right? How much do you know about mining rights? Lith asked. Just everything. What? It wasn't the romantic answer she was hoping for, but she sucked it up and never stopped purring. It's a long story. We'll discuss it after lunch. Now get ready, or we'll be late. One of the things that Lith loved the most about having come clean with both Camilla and his family was that he didn't have to hide any of his schemes anymore. He didn't need to come up with excuses and lies. All he had to do was tell her the truth and ask her for help. It's easy to say when you always were the same damn thing, no matter the circumstances. Camilla stood in front of the mirror, trying to put together a classy outfit from the newly acquired clothes. It's me who needs to walk an extra mile, just not to look like Alina's homely sister. A slow, sweet kiss cut her short and made Camilla forget about the constant stress that comparing herself with the women of Litha's family burdened her with. Do you feel better now, or do you need more confidence? He asked. Much better, thanks. She started humming while picking the tight-fitting red sweater to emphasize her raven black hair, a pair of night blue cashmere pants to highlight her slender legs, and both outlined her curves. Just as Camilla had predicted, everyone but Lith had changed their clothes. The lunch was pleasant, delicious, and together with the busy morning made everyone sleepy. Back in their bedroom, Lith told Camilla all about the real nature of Jambel's dungeon crisis, Zalgrish's lab, and the silver mines he hoped to acquire. She listened to the story with bated breath, becoming pale when she heard about the two Baylors he had fought. Thank the gods you're all right. She clung to him as if those events had just happened instead of being in the past. Helping a lich was madness. Why didn't you call for backup? Those monsters were immortal, remember? Also, Zalgrish would have rather helped the traitors than lose decades of hard work. At least they were in his same boat. That way I saved the day, preventing the death of lots of soldiers and an angry lich from haunting these lands. Lith said, and getting yourself quite the souvenirs. Camilla furrowed her brows in disapproval. The job of a ranger comes with both hazards and benefits. He shrugged. Besides, I reported the existence of the silver mines, and the adamant forge would have either be retrieved by Zalgrish or lost in the cave-in. Point taken, she said while pondering what the kingdom's laws required for an ex-member of the military to make use of information acquired during their service. The kingdom considered the mines lost after the mountain collapsed. The fact that they never sent prospectors means that they consider the task uneconomical. There is no gate in the vicinity, no place where the workers could live on site, and the mines would be closed mid-fall at best. To make matters worse, it would be a huge gamble spending so much money with no certainty the metal veins are worth the trouble. You can apply for mining rights, but make sure to state on your request how you learned about the silver. That way, if the kingdom doesn't stop you, it will be equivalent to a formal wave on its side. If you don't, the ruler of the region might use the omission as a loophole to seize your mines if the business booms. Camilla said, Thanks for the great news, Cammy. You're really sexy when you use legal jargon. Lith embraced her while burying his nose in her hair, losing himself in its sweet scent. Not so great, silly. The kingdom has endless resources compared to you and decided to give up on the mines. How do you plan on overcoming all the problems I listed? No clue, he replied. But at least Naurand can help me find the best access point to the silver veins and check if they are worth the trouble. I'll think about the rest when the time comes. The days were still short, so Lith used the time while the others napped to leave Jambel and work on his side project. He warped together with Tista and Naurand near the city walls to alert the guards they were leaving. Don't worry, Archmage Verhen. There shouldn't be trouble this time of the year, but we'll reinforce security during your absence, said the gate sergeant, a man in his mid-30s, about 1.77 meters, 5 feet 10 inches, with blonde hair and blue eyes. He wore a light metal armor over heavy winter clothes and a bulky left shoulder protector to balance for the lack of his right arm. There was no stump, not even the shoulder was left, as if the missing limb had been vertically cut off. What happened to your arm? Tista asked. Nothing much. Last year we had a small monster outbreak of our own, but Ranger Verhen was already busy with Makosh, so we had to deal with it on our own. One of those bastards emitted a black ray that opened a hole in the walls and took my arm. Chapter 975 Madness for Hire Part 1. There was nothing left to heal, yet I consider myself lucky. I survived to tell the tale, and Baron Weiland put me behind a desk instead of firing me. The only battlefield left for me is that against paperwork, but I can at least train recruits. The sergeant said, Why not regrowing it? Naurand was baffled at human society abandoning its veterans. Not even His Excellency's personal mage knows how to do it, and even if she did, it would cost too much. I'm a member of the militia, not of the army. Jambel can't afford to send all those like me to the White Griffin. Regrowing a limb required 2 teams of 3 healers each. Hiring 6 mages at the same time was something beyond even a noble household's abilities. The 6 great academies were the only place that provided such services at an affordable price. Interesting. Lith took several purple potions out of his pocket dimension. Drink one of these now and another one once per hour until our return. Will they make my arm grow back? The sergeant was flabbergasted. Do I look like a god to you? Lith scoffed. Of course they won't, but trusting me or not is up to you. See you later. He opened a dimensional corridor that led the group where once the entrance to Zalgrish's lab was. Once the three mages stepped through it, the steps disappeared, and the sergeant turned the 1-hour hourglass after gulping down the first potion. That was generous of you. Tista understood his intentions, but she had a few doubts. What was in those flasks? Not generosity, just foresight. If I manage to get the mines, I'll depend on Jambel's guards to keep the area safe from brigands and protect the cargo until someone picks it up. Jambel has no warp gate, so I'll have to retrieve the silver personally from time to time or send one of the few people I really trust to do it. A few stolen silver nuggets are not a problem. Losing a few kilos of it, however, is unacceptable. Lith replied. He created a hologram representing the blueprints of the mines as he remembered them, showing Naurand where he had spotted the biggest silver veins. I don't plan on spending a single coin unless we find an alternative access point to the mines. Lith nodded at the tons of rock and debris that once were a small mountain range. Naurand, I need you to look for a path to the veins that starts from the ground, and it's stable enough to withstand being excavated without collapsing easily. The second most important requirement is that the silver must be abundant and not be too close to the old mines. The self-destruct mechanism has surely compromised their integrity, and if you consider the thousands of tons of rocks weighing from above, reopening those tunnels is suicidal. Tista, help me look for arrays, traps, undead, or anything that could indicate that Zalgrish is still interested in the area. I'm not going to fight a lich without an excellent reason. Naurand nodded and shape-shifted into his Emperor Beast form. He dived into the ground that parted in front of him and closed immediately after, leaving no trace of his passage. In the meantime, Lith and Tista circled the ruins while casting life-sensing arrays and array-detecting spells. The former would spot any form of life or undeath that might have taken residence in the mine's proximity, while the latter would reveal any recent magical formation. Right after the lab self-destructed, Lith and General Vorg, the army's master warden, had checked the area without finding anything. Unless Zalgrish had placed new arrays after they had left, the area was bound to be safe. Nothing on my side but animals. Tista reported via her communication amulet. Same here. Lith hoped he wouldn't be forced to resort to his contingency plan. Fuck me sideways, he said a second later when his array-detecting spell triggered a spell-detecting array that had remained dormant and invisible even to mana sense until the energy of Litha's magic had fueled it. What a brilliant design, Solus thought. Leaving the array depowered to preserve its strength and make use of the enemy's energy to activate your own formation makes it impossible for the intruder to react until it's too late. Code Blue. I repeat, Code Blue. Lith yelled inside his amulet while cursing the lich's ingenuity. A depowered array was incapable to do any damage, but it was strong enough to send a signal to its caster. Tista and Naurand managed to warp back to his coordinates just in time to see a gate made of a red, spiraling energy open. The humanoid figure that stepped out of it was that of a tall man with a skeletal body, with barely enough skin on his face to express emotions. The cold, red light of undeath shone inside his withered eyes, giving him a cruel gaze. The lich wore a golden magician robe and held in his right hand a silvery staff with several purple mana crystals embedded on it. Bad news. His life force is off the charts, and his blood core is almost entirely red. On top of that, everything he wears is heavily enchanted. Solus shared her mana senses analysis of the lich's prowess. We meet again, Zalgrish. Litha's voice was confident as his eyes flared up with darkness magic. The lich was taken aback by both Litha's eyes and their apparent familiarity. Do I know him, Ratpack? Zalgrish turned to a small being that was following him, being careful to remain hidden behind the lich's vest. He's the ranger called Scourge, Master. You fought together against the usurpers. The creature didn't resemble anything Tista or Naurand had ever seen before. Ratpack was a small humanoid, barely 1.3 meters, 4 feet 3 inches, tall, with pale gray skin and thick grizzled hair. Judging by his appearance and his voice, Ratpack seemed to be a male. He had small pointed ears, pitch-black eyes, and was wearing a yellow mage's robe. Despite his jagged teeth and the claws at the end of his limbs, it looked more scared than dangerous. It seems you've become wiser and stronger, Stooge. Zalgrish's trademark lack of care for names seemed to be unchanged. Let's see how much. The Lich left the adamant staff into Ratpack's hands and stepped forward while Lith took a deep breath to calm down. Let's hope that Kala's teachings work on this madman as well, he thought. Zalgrish's eyes flared up with darkness magic as well, standing right in front of the human archmage before offering Lith his open right hand. Lith slapped it with his own and went for a backhand palm strike, to which Zalgrish replied in kind. The amount of mana the two opponents released was enough to make the air vibrate and cause the body hair of those who witnessed the clash to stand up. Tista and Naurand held their breath while weaving their best spells, ready to intervene the moment the fight started. Yet instead of conjuring magic, the two men bumped their right fists up, down, and then frontally. Okay, now make a full spin, and as soon as you are done, lift your left foot and touch it with your right hand. Solus thought.